And we're back. Make Do Suburban Fireman Podcast, episode 38. I'm your host, Nick Peppard, joined today with our friend, Steve Prziborowski. Steve is out of Santa Clara, California, retired recently, deputy chief there in, I believe, 2021. Is that correct?
End of the year.
End of the year. Nice. Yeah, Steve, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to when Sean jumps on too as well too. So thanks for allowing me to be here.
Absolutely. So, give us a little background. Santa Clara, I think, if I got my geography right, is a suburb of San Jose. Is that correct?
Yeah, literally, and actually, just to clarify, which is very common, Santa Clara County. So Santa Clara County, San Jose is the big city within Santa Clara County, and there's about 10 other cities. Santa Clara City, which is actually where the 49ers play, about 45 minutes south of San Francisco. A lot of people probably don't realize it's not San Francisco they play in, but they border us. So we serve 7 different cities. Cupertino, home of Apple computers. So all of you that have your Apple products, as I have my orchard of iPads and all the other things, thank you for helping support the cause there. But also we serve Los Gatos, home of Netflix. Obviously, a lot of folks are familiar with Netflix. A lot of the other cities, high-tech cities that pretty much are on the west side of San Jose. So spent about 26 and a half years there and still live there in San Jose with my wife, Bonnie. So cool stuff down there.
Yeah, man. One of these days I gotta get out there and hang with you guys on the left coast. But so give us a little bit of background on your fire department, kind of the geography, the makeup of how you guys are set up, call load, that kind of stuff. Like, what did your response areas look like? What did your department look like? You guys big job, medium job? Like, what kind of setup did you guys have there in Santa Clara? Because I honestly, all the last few years knowing you, I don't really know a whole lot about the department other than kind of where it's at.
That's okay. I'll try to give the nutshell here. It's the no job, basically. The jobs are rare, unfortunately, for the area, because if anyone is familiar with the Silicon Valley, which is that whole area around San Jose, very high end stuff, not really any ghetto areas, so to speak, like a lot of other places. What some people would think in our department as being a ghetto is obviously nothing compared to obviously parts of Detroit, Camden, Philadelphia, all the Baltimore, all those other places. So mostly suburban community. We serve about 200,000 people, like I said, over 7 different cities, all on the west side of San Jose. Out of 15 firehouses, about 330 personnel. What else? Through the typical array, engines, truck companies, rescues. We got 3 battalions on duty for the 15 stations. Now, out of 15 stations, firehouses, about 20,000 calls a year. So to do the math, that's not really that busy. And out of 20,000 calls, busiest engine's about 5 calls a day. Average engine's about 3, a couple that run 1 a day. So obviously, thank God we're not paid on commission. And it's not just limited to our area. It's a lot of the Bay Area. A lot of the Bay Area obviously does not have that much departments that fight fire. I mean, even San Francisco, 45 minutes to the north, Oakland, 45 minutes also to the north. I mean, they still also, like us, run about 80%, 75% EMS calls. So of our 20,000 calls a year, 1% actual fire. So that's the only not the only bad part, is probably the bad part about the department, because it's an awesome department with great people that I miss, is that just not a lot of fire activities. So it's not uncommon to have someone that may go weeks, months before seeing a lot of fire. So but that's the reality on a lot of the West Coast places. So we make do with other stuff. Again, great department, a lot of great people that enjoy training and doing what they do. So very fortunate to be involved in the department. And so in a nutshell, there you go.
Yeah, I dig it. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, for the taxpayers, it's not having it's like a two-edged sword, right? I always tell people the fire department, like, we tell people fire prevention stuff, like, don't have fires and stuff, but like, there's the other part of us that like hopes if stuff's gonna burn, it's gonna burn when we're on shift, like we're gonna get to go to it. That is the dichotomy, the internal struggle as a firefighter, is like, on one hand you don't want stuff to burn because that means people are having a bad day. On the other hand, you're like, it's cool, I want to go to fire. So
well, it's sad to say. I mean, you look at like what's going on in Maui right now, all the tragic fire that occurred, last week or so.
yeah.
As much as, I mean, even Maui doesn't fight a lot of fire. Last time I was over there, it's not like they're rocking every day, but that's the unfortunate part, is when things happen, it's at usually at the the people that are suffering obviously are the ones like the citizens, and that sort of sucks. So, but yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's because we got into this to fight fire and put wet stuff on red stuff and have fun with our, our team and our crew and our firehouse. But yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, no, I think like I always tell people, you know, it's not that we wish bad on
Yeah.
people. It's not that you're like coming to work like, man, I hope someone loses everything today. I hope someone dies today. That's not it. I think it really what it comes down to is, you know, if it's going to happen, you hope it happens when you're on shift because you signed up to make a difference. You signed up to be that person, that man in the arena, or that woman in the arena, putting those skills to the test that you've been working to build. And I think like that's, if anything else, it's more or less that you feel validated with all your training and preparation, and it's an honor to be able to use those skills to try to alleviate some of that suffering, to try to make a difference. And so, like, I think firefighters obviously get it, but when you're talking to people outside the fire service, they think you're a little demented sometimes because they're like, "Wait, you like going to fires?"
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the smart people, they say the smart people are running out of the building, and here we are running in, but that's what we signed up for. We enjoy doing.
yeah, no, exactly, exactly. So, let's talk about your career path. I mean, obviously, retired as deputy chief, but you've been speaking pretty regularly, different conferences, FDIC, Firehouse Expo, places like that, and all across the country. I mean, you're pretty, pretty busy guy. But what got you kind of going down the road of presenting and writing and being involved in the fire service, not just in the Bay Area there, but beyond that, across the country? What kind of, sparked your passion for what you do? I know you're really big into leadership. You're really big into mentorship and developing leaders for the fire service. That's a big part of your you know I guess the emphasis. A lot of the classes you teach are geared to those folks that are looking to be better leaders. And so I want to just kind of talk to you, your career path, obviously in the department, and then was there a tipping point in your career where you're like, hey, I want to share this with other people. I want to, leave it a little bit better. I want to take this message abroad. And when did that kind of come about for you? And obviously you got to do some pretty cool things
Mm-hmm.
over the last few years that I've known you. But man, it's I just want to hear the journey and for you where that point was in your career, because I think it's similar for a lot of guys, but I also think there's always unique facets that come in where someone gives you a nudge or someone kind of puts that in your ear, like, hey, you know what, maybe you should share this.
Well, it's funny that you asked that question because it's such perfect timing in the sense that one of the things I'm also fortunate to do is teach the college. And as much as I enjoy, being in front of audiences, whether it's firefighters, engineers, company officers, all the way up to fire chiefs, I also love the future firefighters, the wannabe firefighters. And this week, Thursday night, is my first in-person class. I've been teaching at the community college for as long as I've been on the job, 30 years plus. Chabot College, which is about just south of Oakland, about 30 minutes north of here in San Jose. And I do the intro to fire science class, which is basically that first in. They're green, they're 18 years old, all the way up to 40 years old, it seems like. And they're people that are fresh out of high school, all the way to second or third or fourth career changes. And I am already making my notes for Thursday night's class because, that it's great to be in front of an audience like at FDIC or Firehouse Expo, but it's also be so cool to be in front of those people that are just like, what's this about? This is cool. I see Big Red driving down the road. It seems pretty cool. Or I see something on TV. And then I'm going to share, this story with them, obviously in a different manner, but because I'm trying to inspire them like I was inspired, back in, God, 1991, because way back when I, like many kids, I grew up in Oakland, San Leandro, and we had a firehouse a couple blocks away. And like many kids, I was exposed to the fire department. I used to love seeing the fire engines going by. My dad used to work in law enforcement, so he took me. He didn't want me to get in law enforcement, but he was like, "Hey, become a firefighter." But so I was exposed to it, and that was the career path I always wanted to take. Um, and I was working at CVS drugstores, which is Long's drugstores. I was going to high school and college, and as much as I wanted to jump into the firefighting realm at 18 years old, I was turned off a little bit because sort of like in the late 80s, there was a big push as there is today for really diversity hiring in the Bay Area. And I was flat out told by a lot of people when I graduated high school in '84 that, hey, you're a white male, you don't stand a chance, go to college or get another job or whatever else. I'm like, oh shit, that sucks. So I always had it in the back of my mind that I want to be a firefighter. So I was working in management at the drugstore. I was going to college just because I wasn't really sure what my path is going to be. My parents were pushing me to get a degree, and like, okay, I get it. And it wasn't until maybe 4 years out of my 6.5 year college degree. I'm 6.5 years to get a 4 year college degree, but I wasn't focused. I was having fun working full time. My buddy Greg Vitz, who I grew up with, went to school with, both of us always used to talk firefighting. We'd share like fire engineering and firehouse magazines because we were both interested in high school and that stuff. We were like probably the only two that I know selling in high school. So we always had that path of let's become firefighters. We both worked in, Long's Drugstore, which was bought out by CVS. We were both going to college. And it was really only until we got to the end of our, 6 year college career that it's like, we need to get the hell out of this place. I want to get my degree because I spent all this time and money into it and all this hard work. At least get the degree. And let's take this seriously because we also, as he joked one day, he goes, I don't want to see myself building feminine hygiene displays all day long, because that was sort of the joke at the drugstore. It was cool bunch of people to work with, but here I am building tampon displays. And it's like, we got to get serious with this shit. So we literally sat down and we got to chart the shit out. And at the time, this is the early 90s in the Bay Area with all the diversity push still. It was like, hey, here's the path that most people told us when we started talking to people that we knew. You got to get your EMT certification. Think about going to a college, taking some fire science classes, getting an academy, because a lot of departments are requiring academies at the college. And if that doesn't work, get your paramedic license, because departments are starting to go paramedic, which they were in the early 90s. So it's like shit, and start testing. So we both took San Jose's test before we started Chabot College. Here we were. Didn't know what the hell we were doing. We took our first test, whatever, 10,000 people. We both came out, I think, in the top 50 for our first test. Like, holy shit, but then again, it was a reality suck that San Jose hired literally, I think it was 21 people, one white male out of 21, I think it was. Ooh, okay, there's the writing on the wall. Then the next academy, they hired like another 9, one white male out of 9. And I was like, oh shit. And again, I'm not bitter or anything else. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So it's like, we kept plugging away, got our EMT, started doing what we could. We became explorer firefighters for the city of Alameda Fire Department. We finished our academy. We're still testing, taking tests. We became a student firefighter with Oakland Fire. Oakland was very similar to like Camden back in the days, with a lot of good action, a lot of good fire, which was actually, I saw more fire in Oakland a year and a half as a 5th guy on an engine than I ever saw in Santa Clara County Fire. So we kept down that path of just trying to continue testing, making ourselves better, and then we went to paramedic school. That's when all the doors opened, because in the Bay Area in 93, 94, all the departments are going ALS. So that was narrowing down the 5,000, 3,000 competition down to like 100 or less. So 4.5 years into it, I'm a student firefighter. I'm a part-time firefighter near Sacramento. Finally, I get my paramedics, and that's when the doors opened. Santa Clara County Fire was going ALS. And they were only an 8-station department now they're 15. And they're like, we need to hire 11 paramedics. There was only 60, I think, one of us applying, and I came out number 3. This is 4.5 years of testing. And I didn't give up. I'm continuing to go down the path. So I got hired there in 1995. Spent about 6 years firefighter engineer, about another 6 years as a captain, about 7 years as a battalion chief, and then the last 10 years as a deputy chief, training deputy chief, ops deputy, admin, then back to training, all 40-hour positions. But some of the best times I had obviously were firefighter, captain. Those were the best gigs. But anyway, that led me up to the end of 2021 when I retired. And throughout the whole time, I've been teaching at the college. I used to run the fire science program full time for about 5 years when I was on shift, because it was easy to do on shift. And when I got promoted to deputy chief, I can't do both. I'll just teach one class a semester. And then what got me into this stuff, just to go way back, when I'm in that first Chabot College class, the one I teach now, the Intro to Fire, Fire 1, I was really, Greg and I are talking. We have all of our instructors. They're all active on-duty firefighters, a few retired guys, but all inspiring guys that are like, you know what, I want to be like them one day. And I'm just thinking small. I'm thinking at the college level. But like I mentioned, we're reading our firehouse, our fire engineering, And we got to put names to faces, so-and-so is writing this article. They work for FDNY, so-and-so, LA Fire, Chicago, whatever, big, small. And that's how I started putting names to faces. I'm reading these monthly magazines, obviously pre-internet, so we didn't have the access like we do today. And those were some of my mentors. And the funny thing is my instructor for Fire One, Bob Buell, he was only like on the job 4 years. He was like 24 years old, 4 years on the job, a lieutenant, and here he's teaching the class. And the guy knew every fucking thing. It was like, my bad if I don't know if I can swear or not, my bad. But he knew everything, and he's a good dude. He had street cred and everything else. And he was that guy that inspired me to keep doing what I'm doing. And I was one of those people that thought naively, well, I got to have 30 years on the job to be an instructor. I got to have like street cred with FDNY or Boston or whatever else. And it wasn't until maybe I'm watching my instructors at the college, they're like, no, you can do this too. I mean, you got to get some time on the job. You got to get some credibility. You have to have some certain qualifications like instructor training and at least a 2-year degree. But that's what inspired me that I wanted to do that. So anyway, coincidentally, Bob's now my boss. I was his boss, and him and I both teach the Fire One class. He does the morning, I do the afternoon. So he's still a good dude. But anyway, that was my introduction. But naively, I thought I had to have a lot of experience. Well, Santa Clara County Fire, we don't fight fire. So I'm not going to teach and talk about strategy and tactics. I mean, not to say I can't, or command and control. I mean, yeah, I got experience, but not to the level of people that are doing it single every day. So that's where I'm like, well, how do I get my foot in the door to trying to help people? Well, as a firefighter, you don't really have a lot of street cred for pretty much leadership stuff, officer development. So I focus on entry-level firefighting, helping people get hired as firefighters. That's why I got my foot in the door there. And I started helping out teaching at the EMT class because they were looking for helpers there, paramedic class, getting some experience. And one thing leads to another. I'm teaching part-time for free in the EMT program. The next thing you know, I am a probationary firefighter. You want to run our EMT program at the college? Yeah, I can squeeze it in my work schedule. But yeah, sure. And then next thing you know, hey, you want to help out the academy, and then you want to teach a semester class, just a firefighter here. And it's like, okay. So that's how I was smart enough to take advantage of my opportunities. And then 22 years ago, when the internet was starting to roll around, I know many people going, no, it's been around forever. No, it hasn't, and I'm that old. Firehouse Magazine was looking for, hey, we're starting I know this sounds ancient. We're starting a website, firehouse.com. We're looking for authors. And obviously, like I mentioned, I don't have the credit for strategy tactics, but they were looking for career-related authors to do their whatever monthly blogs. I'm like, well, shit, I can start the career development stuff. So I started putting together stuff for getting hired, oral interview prep, because I'd done a lot of that stuff. And again, I'm just a firefighter, but getting my feet wet. And then next thing you know, one thing leads to another, where it's like, hey, you start writing articles there. And the next thing you know, you start putting submissions in. I don't have a chance in hell to teach at FDIC or Firehouse. Next thing you know, Firehouse, after a few years, when I'm a captain, they're like, hey, you want a chance to speak here? Oh, shit. Okay. But that was not by chance. It was because I was writing articles. I was speaking at the college level and just getting whatever I can part-time, getting paid. And then 5 years later, after putting in for FDIC 5 years in a row, boom, you finally get accepted. So it was a slow build. Nothing's fast. I don't expect it to be fast. It's been a great journey. And just one thing leads to another is what I've learned based on the work you put into it, the effort, the passion that you show, and the fact that there's not a lot of people that I think are jumping in to get out of the firehouse to sometimes do the things that we're fortunate to do. And that's fine. That's not their gig. A lot of people don't like speaking, don't like, whether it's like this, whether it's in front of a full audience, whether it's writing things down, and that's cool. But those are things I've enjoyed doing. So long story short, all those things I think I'm able to continue today, and I'm trying to stay relevant by not just obviously doing stuff like this, but still speaking, whether it's entry-level folks, still trying to stay in touch with people. So I'm not that old retired guy, which happens to all of us at some point, obviously, but I'm trying my best to at least stay engaged and stay relevant. And that's why I'm fortunate to do stuff like this. So long ass story, trying to condense it, but it's just, you get me going on this passionate subject, and I look at all the opportunities I've had. It's all because I put my neck out there and raise my hand to get volunteer for something. And sometimes you take a beating because you embarrass yourself by whatever it is, or you get rejected a shitload of times. The next thing you know, it's like you keep on going. So there you go.
And man, First of all, enjoy it. I enjoy it. I always like hearing the backstory. And man, one of the things that I want to kind of draw out of that, that I love that you said, is, talking about just basically kind of taking every opportunity that came to you and embracing, putting your neck out there. I can tell you that, that you miss 1,000, you know, you take 1,000 shots, you're going to make some shots, right? And it's one of those things that, you miss every shot that you don't take, you automatically missed it, right? You can't make a shot you don't take. And, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. I'm not trying to butcher our sports. You miss 1,000, was it 100% of the shots you don't take? That's the Wayne Gretzky quote.
Or the flip side, you can, you miss, if for baseball fans, you can still, get in the Hall of Fame for getting 3 out of 10 right, 300 average,
Yeah.
It's less than that. Yeah.
Well, I think like that's the beautiful thing about life in general is you just don't know if you don't try. Like you've got to put the effort forth, keep grinding, keep hustling, and you're not going to get told yes if you never ask. You're not going to get told, get those opportunities if you never put yourself out there. And hey, what's up, Sean?
Hey, brother, what's going on? Sorry, I'm late.
No, you're good. So, yeah, we're just talking about, taking chances, taking shots, putting yourself out there. But, I think when it comes down to it, it's people a lot of times, and I was the same way. It took some nudges from other people to kind of get out of my comfort zone and do things like this, do things like, writing articles or, putting in to teach at conferences or any of that stuff. I mean, and it really, if you have a passion for the fire service, you like, and you have it, something that you enjoy doing, whether it's teaching, writing, blogging, podcasting, whatever, don't be afraid to take that leap of faith, man, because you don't know where that journey is going to lead you. And I can tell you, there's so many cool things that all three of us here have got to do simply by willing to take the chance to put yourself out there and make connections with people. You get an opportunity to teach at Firehouse, and you go teach there, and you meet awesome dudes like you guys, and like start making connections. And the next thing you know, you're podcasting together, or you're seeing each other at a different conference doing training or teaching or whatever. And that really is the thing about it is, you don't have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be, a 30, 40-year guy from FUNY to share what in your passion. And, I think like that's the thing you talked about. Hey, I'm teaching this because it's what I know. I think that's the beauty of it. Like teach what you know, teach what you're passionate about, find something you love and that you have experience with and share that. And it doesn't always have to be, the grizzly 30, 40-year-old urban guy talking strategies, tactics. Sometimes it's, how do you get hired? How do you be successful early in your career? How do you, grow in your career? And the leadership thing obviously is a big part of your, career path, Steve. And that's just it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just passionate brothers and sisters trying to make it a little bit better, right? Trying to leave the job better than they found it. And, it is encouraging to see, and hear stories like that, because I think for people that are listening to the podcast, like, oh, what do I have to offer? Mm-hmm. Well, you'd be surprised what you might have to offer, and you won't know if you don't swing the bat. You're not going to hit the home run if you don't swing the bat. And, but that being said, Sean, thoughts on that? I know you're kind of jumping in here, man, but certainly, I look at where the path over the last 5 years, 6 years that I've known you, man. You've had some pretty awesome opportunities yourself and things that, from humble beginnings in South Florida to kind of where you're at now with Build Your Culture and doing some of the great things you're doing across the country with Lakes Hot and some of the conferences there, man. Certainly opportunities have definitely presented themselves over the last few years, and a lot of it's been just a lot of hard work and hustle on your part.
Yeah, man. And so I'll say, like I always say, you don't need permission, right? And I think a lot of people are seeking some sort of acceptance from that, like, hey, is this okay if I do it? And it's just, look, if you got something to say or you're passionate and you feel like there's a need for something, you want to do something, just do it. Nobody's going to do it for you. And I think the thing is, like, we often we kid ourselves and we're like, oh, I don't deserve that, or I'm not good enough for that, or maybe I'm not ready, or whatever the excuse is, and that's just it. It's just an excuse. It's a scary thing, man, when you put yourself out there for whatever you're trying to do. You got to be prepared that some people are going to absolutely love it and support you, and other people are definitely not. And that's okay. I think anything worth having is worth going for, and if you don't have some stones cast your direction and along that path, then maybe you're not doing something worthwhile. So yeah, it's anytime for me personally that something has come up, I sat there and I thought about it, and I just realized, like, hey, you know what? Number one, I've got to do what's right for me, what's best for me, what's best for my family. And then number two, what is best for the fire service? Like, what is the mission that I want? And often, and I'm sure Steve can relate to this, is with that leadership stuff. I think a lot of that comes in a form that, like, you weren't given that in some capacity, right? So you obviously have a void you're trying to fill. And I think, some people chase that, they may never have those role models or whatever. So I just say this to them: be that person. If there's something lacking, right, that you don't have, give that to somebody else. And that'll be a good start for you.
Well, and that is so true, because going back to the beginning, I needed that tap on the shoulder, I think, like we all did. And that's, one thing I always talk about as much as I can is some of the best opportunities that have ever come my way are because someone took the time to tap me on the shoulder when I'm doubting myself, or I'm thinking, I don't have that credibility to do that, or I don't have the time. Like, as much as I enjoyed teaching when I was a firefighter, I can't remember who I was talking to, but it was one of those things that, yeah, one of these days I'd love to write for Fire Engineering and Firehouse. I'd love to speak at the conference, just because I think I got something to offer. And then somebody said, "What are you waiting for?" Well, I need 20 years on the job, and I need to, whatever, be a captain or a chief, get my credibility. And then it's like, no, someone actually said, these are your golden years, meaning not 60 or 70 or 80 when you retire. These are your golden years while you're in the prime of your career. Yeah, maybe you don't have that 40 years on the job, but not everyone does. Everyone starts out. So those taps on the shoulder can go so far. And talking about leadership, and that's why when I got my foot in the door of, like, helping entry-level future firefighters, of course, as I gain more credibility through time on the job, or maybe, become a captain, now maybe I can have that influence. Because I always like the concept of leadership, officer development, but obviously when you're a firefighter, you can't really talk much leadership at that level until you're at that level. No disrespect, but it's like when you see, who the heck is this firefighter trying to tell us what to do? And I'm not telling you what to do. But the whole thing about leadership now that I try to share with others, whether you're the brand new firefighter up to the fire chief, is leadership transcends all ranks. Whether you're the new kid on the block or the old kid on the block, leadership is about everything. You may not have the supervisory bugles or rank or job description, but even as a firefighter, you have that ability to demonstrate leadership for yourself. Number one, personal leadership, let alone influencing others, leading by example, doing the right thing, taking care of others, doing the best for the community. That's what leadership is, and passing that baton, even as just the senior firefighter, which the senior firefighter, a lot of departments, has 3 years on the job, because that's just the way it is. That's okay. You got 3 years in the job, but you better be training and mentoring those below you.
Yeah, I want to just kind of hone in on this for a second. There's a lot of talk about, leadership in the fire service, and I just want to hone in, what it is and what it isn't, because a lot of people associate, traditionally, leadership with rank.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last few years, there's been an emphasis put on, like, hey, you can lead where you're at, in different capacities, obviously, and in your circle obviously grows as you move up in rank. But I think we can all agree, leadership, you don't automatically become a leader simply by having bugles. That doesn't make you a leader. And leadership is not, the same thing as management. The managing is one thing, but leading is a whole different ball of wax. So, Steve, I want to get your thoughts on, what it is, what it isn't, and how, when you're looking at leadership qualities and trying to describe this in your classes and, talking to people, what is it that you hone in on that are some hallmarks of leadership, and what sets it apart from management and from, you know, all the other the to-do list, checklist things that come with the job?
Well, and thanks for asking that question. I think it's very important to have that up front because, yeah, leadership and management get confused. But if you're talking leadership, you also have to talk management, but you also have to talk supervision because they all are three distinct things that sometimes all go together. And I'll use the example like, you know, I sometimes ask in the classroom, how many of you in this room are not leaders? And of course, usually the firefighters, engineers will raise their hands. Well, I'm just a firefighter. No, you're not just a firefighter. I mean, you may not have that in your job description, but you are a leader. Everyone's got leadership potential. You get promoted to company officer, you also have the management responsibilities, the supervisory responsibilities in addition to leadership. Well, the old saying, we lead people, we manage things. You got to have leadership, but you also got to have management because we still got to manage things and get things done. And then obviously supervision covers responsibility over things, but also people. So they all sort of tie together there. Now, when it comes to leader, and you also got to throw in followership, and there's a balance there too, because like you mentioned earlier, just because you're now promoted to the ranks, you are a quote of the leadership rank, you don't automatically get followers. You may get some because if that's, hey boss, if that's what you want, you know, you're the boss. Yeah, I get it. So obviously the position does not guarantee followership. Well, there's a balance too because we can't have all leadership without any management or supervision. Because I mean, it's great to have all this great vision of leaders and get things done, but then you also got to have structure and discipline and all that other stuff. But you also got to have followers. And on the flip side, you can't be a blind follower either because we all know there's people that will blindly follow anyone to a cliff and jump over the cliff. Just okay, I'll kill myself because that's what so and so said. Everything's got to be a balance. And I think when we talk about characteristics, if you had asked me that question 30 years ago as a new firefighter, obviously it would have been a lot different because times change. In today's world, it's so much more complex being I'll throw it together, leader, supervisor, manager as a company officer or above, or just leader at any rank. It's so much more complex today for a variety of reasons. So today's world, 30 years ago, it was like, hey, jump. And then, of course, we all probably heard that, well, how high? Well, now, of course, jump. Why? Well, so obviously it's not as easy as it, and as much as people say, and I hate this because I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. A lot of people will say, well, these kids today, well, what, before you go on that conversation of blaming and pointing fingers at generations, guess what they were doing 30 years ago when I was getting hired? Same thing. Guess what we're going to do 30 years from now? Same thing to whatever age is there. It's different issues. Today it's technology. Back then it was whatever. So the whole point is leadership is really characteristics. You got to be a people person. And the old days of do it because I told you so, we know obviously doesn't work today. And it requires someone to be more of a people person to recognize that I got to get to know people, meaning whether you're a brand new firefighter or you're a company officer or a chief officer, you got to know your people. And that takes a lot of time and effort around the kitchen table, in the rigs, casual conversations, training, drilling, on the job, getting to know people inside and out, because what makes you tick, Nick, versus what makes you tick, Sean, versus anybody else is slightly different. And to me, a good leader / supervisor, but again, leader, understands, okay, I'm going to have to be able to maybe approach you slightly different than you. I mean, and no different than anyone that's gone through instructor training. If you go through instructor training, you realize that obviously adults learn different, and you what one adult understands and learns may not be the same for the others. So I think it's being a good people person with good people skills, whether it's social skills, whether it's the ability to connect with people and build relationships. Obviously, trust and integrity are up there big time, because we all know that it takes a lifetime to earn that trust, that credibility, that integrity through your actions, and it takes a second to kill them. Now, I've also learned lately, and it sounds bad lately, but hey, never too young to learn, how much empathy and compassion are critical. I mean, again, 30 years ago when I was hired as a new firefighter, it was like, suck it up, buttercup, just deal with it, whatever the situation was, a traumatic situation. Whereas today, people sometimes, I think, are falsely accused. We hear this, oh, they're snowflakes. They can't handle the toughness of it. Well, you know what? Okay. Does that make them a bad person? No, because everyone handles things differently, processes things differently. And again, it might have been easy to say, suck it up, buttercup 30 years ago. But then what we've learned over mental health, behavior, behavioral mental health emergencies, behavioral health emergencies, the amount of suicides going on, post-traumatic stress. I've been fortunate that I've never had any of those issues, given a lot of the stuff goofy stuff that I've seen in my career, knock on wood. But that's me. But I can't say you're going to be the same way. And I can't just say, well, just suck it up and deal with it because you're whatever. We had a car wreck that 3 kids are dead and blah, blah. Well, that to me is not leadership, because if I'm truly a leader, I'm looking out for everybody that are at my rank, below my rank, above my rank, to make sure that they're where they need to be mentally, physically. Not to mention, I mean, I'm not discounting the people that we're fortunate to serve, but also being empathetic and compassionate to basically recognizing when people need that tap on the shoulder, or that, hey, brother, you want to just have a conversation? Let's grab a cup of coffee, or how you doing? I'm doing okay. Are you doing okay? You know, I'm here for you. And you know, so the whole qualities and characteristics of a leader today, I mean, that could be a 10-hour discussion, but I think that you can always narrow it down to just people skills. And again, the old autocratic leadership of do it because I told you to, that ain't working. So you know what? It's going to require more effort for all of us to get to know people and realize, how do I best be a good brother or sister, teammate, crewmate for those that I work with, but also making sure that we're taking care of those that we're fortunate to serve.
Man, I love that, especially the last part where you said being a good team member, brother, sister, things like that.
Mhm.
For me, obviously this is nothing like, you know, crazy, but I have this idea that you just, to be a good leader, you got to be a good person, right? And you
Mhm.
got to be able to do what others don't want to in any situation. And that's no matter what rank you happen to be. I mean, that's just life in general. And you brought something up about, you know, like 30 years ago, they were complaining about the same thing, and we're complaining about it today. And I always said, whenever I found myself in a position where I'm like, man, I don't like this. I don't like what's being done to me for the whole seniority thing or whatever, of like, hey, this is just the way it is. Like, suck it up, you know, it'll get better. And I always said to myself, if I was given the chance, I would never do that to somebody else. And I think that's what we need more of in the fire service, is instead of saying, well, I did it, so you got to do it too, we got to be open and saying, you know what? I did it and it sucked. I did
Mhm.
it and I was miserable. Like, I didn't like it. It's time to change it. Instead of complaining about everything and just passing it on to everybody else, and it just, all you do in that situation is make more of a mess, right? Because
Uh-huh.
you're not fixing anything. You're just like, well, it's not my problem anymore, so I don't care. But at one point you did. So I urge everybody to remember that feeling. Like, remember what it was like when you were in that situation. And when other people come in after you, make sure that you're just good. Like, just, hey, you know what? I may not like doing this, you know, but for this person to have a better career or a better experience than me, I'm going to do it. And to me, that's like one of the most simplest forms of leadership there is, because now you build credibility
Mhm.
by your actions, but you also build respect. You know, not everyone's going to respect you for that, but a lot of people will, because the thing is, you don't have to do it, but you're willing to do it.
Well, that's so true, because I remember as a firefighter, as I'm trying to navigate, going, okay, at some point I'd love to be a captain. Um, and not for the power reasons, the ego reasons, but to try to make things better. Because, like what you mentioned earlier, Sean, was, you know, the higher up you go, the more influence you have, which can be true. And I naively, as a firefighter, thought, well, I got to be the fire chief of the department to make a lot of positive change. Then, as I went through the ranks and got to deputy chief, I realized, holy crap, a lot of our best change in many departments comes from the lower ranks. Sometimes firefighters struggle a little bit with that, and that's not because of them, it's because of their rank. That's not their fault. In some departments, there is that, well, you're just a firefighter, which sucks. No, they're some of the best decisions I've ever seen come from the lowest ranks. I mean, they need sometimes support and nurturing and watering, so to speak, to help get that message up there, because it really requires that. But I remember as a firefighter going, we had a battalion chief, and I remember he was all the what not to do. And I'm a new firefighter thinking about, God, if I'm ever a captain or battalion chief. And I remember a wise captain who goes, Steve, everyone can be a role model. Even he can be a role model of what not to do when you get in that position. So learn from those things. And that's something I've tried to instill in myself and others, that learn from the good in people, but also learn from the not so good, because promise yourself never to do those things again, and try to share those things, because I think it's a two-way street right there. But that is so true, that yeah, everyone's an example at some point, but we've got to continuously have our radar on to try to, oh shit, was I like that or did I do that? Oh, my bad, and hopefully be open, hopefully be approachable enough for people to come to you and say, hey, the way you sort of threw that out there. Like I had a captain one day come into my office as the training chief. He goes, and we got hired together, so we had a great relationship. He's like, hey, chief, can I offer? And he's dancing. I'm like, what's up, Dougie? Come on in. He's like, I just want to offer a suggestion. Dude, please do. And he was like, I know, don't get mad at me, but I know you won't. But he goes, I know where your heart's in the right place. I know you meant not what you said, but the way you said it came out this way. And I'm like, oh shit, really? And he's like, yeah. He goes, maybe from me, he goes, maybe when you got something like that, maybe approach it like, hey, I got as a suggestion or consideration, maybe if you find yourself in that position next time. And it stuck with me. I'm like, I didn't realize that was the way I was doing it, but I could see that. Yeah. Okay. I'm like, thank you, brother. And to this day, there's like, when I have those things, okay, yeah, again, it's about people skills because you got one chance sometimes to turn off people or hopefully get them to say, okay, I may not agree with you, but at least I see where you're coming from and you're not an asshole, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to me that kind of doubling back on Sean's point for a second. The amount of people who things suck, whatever, coming up, and they get seniority, they move up, and because it sucked for them, they could give two shits about the guys coming in the door. Like, oh, I made it. I finally got, enough seniority where I'm not on the ambulance anymore, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. Like, and they, you know what I'm saying? Like, we are notorious for this vicious cycle of eating our own.
Uh-huh.
And, now I made it. It's not my problem anymore. Like, I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to, put up with this crap or whatever. And that is a terrible mindset to me. Like, you're not leading, you're not making the organization better by propagating the same mindset that has endured for 30, 40, 50 years in the organization, where people just like, it's just like, it's going to, your first 8 or 10 years are going to suck, but eventually it'll get better. Like, and you got to start asking yourself, if you hated it for that first decade of your career, like in you saw solutions and you saw opportunities to improve the system and to collectively work together to make it better, and then you get in that position and you don't do anything with it. To me, like, if you made it to the point where you got enough seniority, rank, whatever, in your department to have a bigger circle of influence and to push for positive change, and you don't, that just, to me, like, that says that you're not interested in leading. You're not interested in, if your mindset is, hey, we had to deal with it, they can too. And don't get me wrong, I understand there are certain things that come with rank, seniority, things like that. That all is part of the service. But I think, like, when we get to the mindset, we just are a stick in the mud and unwilling to have real conversations. You talk about people that you work for, that what not to do or whatever, or things along the way that you said, man, I want to change that. I want to be different. And then you get to that place where you have that influence in that circle and you don't change it and you don't do anything different then you're no different than the same people you complained about and the same system you complained about for 8, 10, 12, whatever, 15, 20 years, whatever. It took you to get to a place to start changing stuff or making improvements, and you don't do anything with it. Then you're no different. You're just as complicit in kind of accepting, yeah, it is what it is. That mindset, it's not my problem anymore. And I think, like, that sums it up, right? Leadership is saying, you know what? If I have the ability to influence positive change, it is my responsibility. If I have an opportunity to make it better for the next generation, if I have an opportunity to make the organization, that make the machine run better, to make, the experience for our people from day one of their career to day, whatever, 30 of their career, or year 30 of their career, rather, that should be the goal, is to improve the process for everybody going forward as much as possible along the way, so that that we're not crapping all over our people, that we're not burning people out early on. And to me, like I said, it's just, when I hear people say that, when that's the mindset, they bitched for 10 years and they finally got in a position where they don't have to put up with it anymore. And now it's not my problem. You complained and you threw rocks at the Chiefs and you threw rocks at the officers and the union and all this stuff and threw them on all these 10 years. And then you get in a place where you can do something about it and you've arrived. Well, hey, you know what? I got mine now. So you guys just suffer. And to me, like, that is the opposite of leadership. That to me is passing the buck. That is not ownership. That is not leadership. And I think, like, what it comes down to is a lot of times is, people don't want, it's uncomfortable, right? Change is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to have hard conversations. And at the end of the at the end of the day, like, you've got to ask yourself, am I truly trying to be a leader, or am I just maintaining status quo, managing the status quo, managing the system? Because that's what a lot of people do, right? They get into that it's not about leading and growth, it's about managing and maintaining the
And
status quo.
no, and sorry to cut you off there. And because I just want to circle back on a few things. I can see, I'm not agreeing with this, but I can see how the maintaining the status quo happens. And I only say that because at the firehouse, we got good gigs at the firehouse, whether you're a firefighter, driver, company officer, you got a good gig, run calls, help people in that capacity, whether they knock on the door or whether you're out on a call, hang out with your buddies, and get fun shit. I mean, do fun shit, break shit, all that fun stuff. And then you get promoted up, especially up to, say, a battalion chief and or administrative chief, like a deputy chief or assistant chief. And you're not at the firehouse anymore, but your workload is like, I mean, your head's like right here, and it's usually the water line's right here, and you're never getting your work done. You're feeling like you're just circling around. And I can see, and I'm not agreeing with it, but I can see how a lot of people just get so stuck into that management role because they get overwhelmed. And it's not right, but they got to force themselves to get out of the desk, get to the firehouse, go to the calls when they can, stay connected with the troops, but also get their work done. But then it also causes a bad thing, because anyone that's worked a 40-hour office spot knows it ain't 40 hours. It ain't, well, some people treat it as that in some departments. I get that, even less, but it's a lot more hours, and it's not just a Monday through Friday gig. And for all those hours that you're spending going to calls as a chief, or going to, not as a battalion chief, I'm saying as an office chief, going to calls, hanging out at firehouses, you're taken away from your work. But then you end up doing your work maybe at night at home or on the weekends, which may affect your family time. But then on the flip side, if you're not getting that stuff done, you're not taking care of your people, because obviously if you're the training chief and responsible for coordinating training, it's great to hang out with the crews, but you're also if you're not getting your work, it's a vicious circle, because you don't want to blow off your family, but you also don't want to blow off your crew by never getting your shit done. But back to what you said earlier, there's a phrase that many have probably heard: meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And I think that's what, like you were saying, is almost like someone gets in that position, they don't want to take the time to try to change things when they can. It's like, okay, it's almost like FUIGM. And then last thing I want to cover on this, I saw a meme out there. I think it was Billy Goldfitter sent it out. If they suck, mentor them. And the whole point goes back to the generational differences of, if you're bitching and complaining about the new kids today or whoever it is, well, then you know what? Look in the mirror, because if you're saying these kids today, I bet you that they're going, these old guys today. So that's not leadership. Leadership is about connecting with all age groups, all ranks, and be able to say, hey, okay, whatever. I'm 56 years old, but there's maybe someone that could be my grandkids' age, even though I don't have grandkids. I don't have kids, but there could be someone 18, 19 years old. Well, leadership is about connecting with them and all those things we've talked about: passing the baton, training them, mentoring them, exposing them. Whether or not they want to promote doesn't matter, but just exposing them to be the best they can be at whatever they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, at the end of the day, it's work to be a leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's work to connect the dots, like you said, between the groups, and to find common ground, to be able to push for positive change. And that is, ultimately, like, make no mistake about it. You have to care about people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to care about the mission. You have to care about, you have to look at the big picture of what is the ultimate end goal here. And sometimes, it's going to put you in, precarious situations throughout your career, throughout your life, because you are going to have to be, you're going to have to be comfortable being uncomfortable to be effective as a leader. Because sometimes, when you're trying to connect those dots, especially when they're very divided sides of the coin, it really is. It puts you in the crosshairs for both groups, right? Because you're trying to find middle ground, and they don't want. Sometimes people don't want middle ground. Some people don't want change. They don't want compromise. They don't want to find, to build a better mousetrap. They're comfortable where they're at. They are status quo. Like don't shake. Don't rock the boat. It's. I read something. Let me see if I can find it here. With Fit to Fight Fire, Sparrow posted this just I think yesterday or the day before about basically making waves when you're rocking the boat and all that kind of stuff. Let me see if I can find the. I gotta find it because it really was a great kind of summation of what it means to lead, right? And I think go ahead, brother.
Because it's funny that you said Fit to Fight Fire, because there's a meme they put out that I just love. Is it the one that talks about having courage in the fire service? About courage is not about running into burning buildings. That's what we signed up to do. I'd like to think we said it's about being able to basically, which I base my courage under fire leadership on, is it takes courage to raise your hand to be that guy or that gal, because now you're the outcast. Not normal decisions. Normal decisions are easy, but it's those occasional decisions that you're going to have all eyes on you, and it can feel lonely. I don't know if that's the same one or not. I was trying to look to bring it up there, but yeah, that's courage, is when you're willing to raise your hand to be a leader. When
was it Andy Starnes that put out the it was a while back, but man, what a fantastic post about the loneliness of leadership. And man, what if those that are listening, if you don't follow Andy Starnes, first of all, do yourself a favor, follow Andy, but look up the loneliness of leadership post. It circulated a few times recently. It's an older post from a couple years ago, but it really kind of sums up the spot that you put yourself in sometimes to step out on the limb and say, hey, I want to make a difference. So, follow me. I'm going to try to make it better. And that doesn't mean you have all the answers. It doesn't mean that you are without faults or perfect, but it does take a tremendous amount of courage to say, hey, you know what? I'm willing to step out, put my neck out there, and try to make a difference. And so I found that quote from Sparrow. It's actually a quote from Mark Batterson that he quoted. It says, you can't make a difference without making waves. And some people in the boat won't like it. So be it. Rock the boat anyway.
Well, exactly. And that's the whole point about leadership. What's the old saying? It's everyone wants to do boss shit until they actually got to do boss shit. And like you mentioned earlier, is we need a tap on the shoulder. Sometimes we need a boot in the ass. I mean, I was a firefighter. I was a recliner sniper, like many firefighters have been fortunate to be. As you're in that recliner, thinking about how you're going to change the world. If I was fire chief, if I was captain, if I was whatever. And I had a battalion chief come in one day who I respected dearly. He was the battalion chief, Bob Smith, loved him dearly. And I remember he's just sort of soaking it all and listening to me talk my shit and everything else, along with the other firefighters. And he didn't say recliner sniper, but he basically said, hey, Steve, how'd you do in the last fire chief's test? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he goes, oh, I'm sorry. He goes, how'd you do in the last battalion chief's test? I'm talking shit about everybody when I'm in that position. And then he finally goes, hey, how'd you do in the last captain's test? I'm going, Chief, I don't know where you're getting at, but I go, I'm taking the captain's test probably next year. He goes, that's my point. You've never walked a day in any of our shoes. So what gives you the right, besides that recliner, to talk shit about any one of us? Because, yeah, it looks easy to be in my job as a BC or the fire chief or whoever else. But until you've realized the pain and suffering that goes along with, like he basically said, being that leader, raising your hand to make not the easy decisions, those tough decisions that are going to piss off people, sometimes at doses they can tolerate or absorb, sometimes not. It's going to be, and that's when the reality set in, is like, yeah, we can all be part of the problem. We can all think we're part of the solution, but when we have to step up, it's a sobering feeling, realizing, oh my God, I'm out almost on a diving board here on a ledge because I'm having to make those occasional calls that are going to take me out of the cool kid club, so to speak. Ooh, shit, I wouldn't want, glad he said it, because I didn't want to say that. I mean, we all know right from wrong in our hearts, but sometimes to have to be that one that raised your hand, whether it's the kitchen table or in front of a whole group of people going, oh, we got to make these tough decisions. Oh, shit. Well, sucks to be you.
Yeah. What I love about that is I think we can all, I mean, anybody even listening can probably all pinpoint a time in their career where somebody has talked so much shit. Like, and when I do this, I'm not gonna do that. And then somehow we all like, hey, look how quickly you forgot where you came from. You know, you got that rank and everything else, and all the things you said you would never do, here you are doing. And what's the next excuse? Oh, well, I got to make my bosses happy too. And it just, the whole point is it's like, I urge anybody, like, I don't care if you never promote.
Mhm.
I really don't. But don't forget where you come from. And don't forget about all the hardships you've endured along the
Mhm.
many years of your service or any of that stuff. Because to me, that's what defines an individual, right? But it's really what you do with those hardships moving forward that makes a difference. And sometimes, like I don't know. I'm not an officer, you know.
Mhm.
I don't really aspire to be one. I love being a fireman and I'm okay with that. But I have many friends who are officers and chiefs and things like that. And when you talk to them, like, you just realize, like, hey, you ask one simple question: why did you promote? And you know what almost all of them say? Because I couldn't do anything from the position I'm in.
Mm.
And having that mindset right there to realize, like, hey, I'm gonna have to move forward. I'm gonna make some decisions that are probably not gonna make me popular, but I can have the choice to sit here and continue to complain about things, or
Mm.
I can do something that I really don't want to do that I'm probably going to lose some friends over that I've made over the years to make some change. And I just think that sometimes people forget how powerful of a position they're in when they choose to do things and they forget about what it was like to be on the line and making those decisions. And like you said before, it's all about balance. And I think as long as we can have that balance and like that true open door policy, like, don't just say you have an open door policy. Then when someone comes to you, like, shit all over it, and now you're in trouble because you had an opinion. Like, really believe it. Like, hey, the people out there that are doing things might be seeing things from a different perspective than you. And then how far long were you detached from that type of, work? So it
Mhm.
really is truly a team effort. At the end of the day, I'm going to do whatever my officers tell me to, whatever my chiefs tell me to, whether I agree with it or not. But I think normalizing
Mhm.
having those conversations of saying, hey, I do want to know where you come from, or being able to say, hey, we came in as firefighters together, right? You've come up the ranks, and I think you need to take a second look at what you're doing here without being offended, right? That's the biggest thing. People often get offended, like you're trying to attack their position when really you're not. You're just trying to give them some perspective that maybe they're not seeing. So all of that to say, as you move forward in your career, I would like to see more people just staying true to themselves and not letting the title overshadow who they truly are and what they truly believe in.
Well, you hit some good points because it's, and I have to preface this in class sometimes because I know sometimes there's firefighters and engineers that are like, why do I got to be in a leadership class? And I try to be very upfront is not everyone's meant to promote. Not everyone wants to promote. Not everyone should promote. Hey, and there's nothing wrong with being whatever it is, whether it's firefighter, driver, whatever, shit, tiller operator. If we got a tiller truck when I was still a firefighter, I never would have promoted above that rank. But, you know, be the best you can be. And that's, I think, the key. And leadership has a role in all ranks. But also another thing you mentioned was, being able to have that relationship to be a good follower, because like it or not, we all have bosses and we got to own our decisions, whether we like them or not. Sometimes we get shit sandwiches and we got to own the decisions as they're ours. But the asking questions upward, I think, also goes both ways, because I think it's a great opportunity when I have firefighters that are in front of me. Again, there's some of those that go, I have no desire to promote. Great, that's cool. Be the best you can be. But I'm also trying to take it to a different level. One of the biggest things I've seen in today's world is that um, the struggle with thinking at a strategic level. And we all know that, okay, let's look at ranks. As a firefighter or engineer, you're focused on task related stuff. That's job task. Company officer, tactical, chief officer, strategic. That's not disrespectful. That's just the org chart, right or wrong, the way things are set up. Again, as a firefighter, you may never have that desire to promote. Cool. But at least I want you to understand the tactical level, how and why tactical decisions are made, as well as the strategic ones. And that's why you were hitting on that, of asking those questions to understand the why. But also, I think officers have an obligation, not in the heat of the battle when the shit's hitting the fan. I mean, but after the fact of, hey, none of you guys want to be an officer. I get that, but people may change their mind. You need to understand where my head was at when I did my 360 at 3 o'clock in the morning. on, wiping the boogers out of my eyes in a short amount of time because I'm trying to get a 360 done while the driver's trying to hook up the hydrant. You're grabbing the nozzle, getting ready to go in the front door. I do that 360. I got a split second to decide go, no go. And I come around, let's just say officer goes around the building and it's pumping fire out of every friggin' orifice. And it took you 10 minutes to get there. Well, we all realize unless there's any amplifying information, if it takes you that long to get there and there's no sprinklers, there's no fire alarms, the odds of anybody surviving fire pumping out of every window, I'm not saying, not most of the time it's not fully involved, but those rare occasions that officer may have to tell that firefighter, hey, we're hitting it hard from the yard. And we all know, said no firefighter ever wants to hear that from their officer. It's like, no, I want to go inside and fight fire. That's what I signed up for. But then I've seen some firefighters go, my officer's a wussy because he didn't let us go into a burning building. Well, tell me more, because there's got to be more to the story. And then usually the story is, well, it was fully involved. Okay. And there's nobody out front saying there's anybody in there. And I know I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but there's time and a place. Well, we should be wanting to go in fires, expect fire, expect victims. But then there may be those occasional situations where it's way beyond our capabilities because we know we can't go in there. But again, that firefighter needs to hear, hey, I'm not trying to be the fun police here. I've got so many hats. I want to go in the burning building too. Trust me. And I care about the citizens. Trust me. But I'm also trying to account for all these different things. And when I see all these different factors, I have to make a decision. It may not be the right decision, may not be the best decision, but I had to make that decision. I don't want to kill or injure any firefighters. But on the flip side, I don't want to kill or injure any civilians because we didn't go in to do our job either. As you so eloquently teach about, searching, we are there to obviously search and get the fire, get the victims and everything else. But trying to understand that, to try to package it down, is that firefighters need to understand the tactical and strategic, even if they don't care to be in those positions. They may not agree with those positions, but that to me is a two-way conversation that needs to happen. So at least everybody understands the ranks above and the ranks below. And that, you go up the ranks, you understand the ranks, don't forget where you came from, but you also need to share those responsibilities. Like, long story short, I ran into a crew one time where they would just, well, my fire chief this, and it's like, okay, you do realize your fire chief, I don't know, it was a long conversation that the individuals go, oh, I didn't realize my fire chief. Oh, yeah, it's easy for you in the firehouse to think your fire chief's not supporting you, but I don't know of any fire chief that wants to shut firehouses down or lay off firefighters. I don't know of any fire chief. I hope there's not out there. But they've also got bosses. They got marching orders. They don't have union protection. Yeah, they're trying to keep things open, but their boss may be on the back end saying, I don't give a shit what you think. You are going to, whatever it is. And that's the unfortunate part, is until you've been in that position, which I haven't as a fire chief, you got to understand there may be different responsibilities, that you try to stay connected, you try to stay grounded, and you try to remember where you came from. But sometimes it's a shit sandwich you have to deal with.
Yeah, no. And like I said, I can only speak from the position that I'm in. So I think the two things to sum that up is, one, professional dementia, right? Climbing the ladder is no excuse to forget how to climb back down. And I think we all collectively need to understand that. Even if you don't promote, being on the job for 15, 20, 25 years, whatever it is not an excuse to no longer know what it's like to be like a probationary firefighter, or have the knowledge to be able to pass down to that individual so they can surpass you in their abilities and be better than you were. That's the whole point, right? So that's number one. But number two, we'll sit in the firehouse, we'll watch football, we'll watch hockey, we'll watch baseball, name the sport, whatever. You think those athletes out there that are playing that game don't know the position of everybody else in that game? They 100% do, because it's essential to win. You have to know what everybody else is doing so that you can make the right decision, right? When it's your turn to make one, and hopefully it'll pay off. So that translates to the fire service, that I, from a firefighter's position, can't armchair quarterback the senior man, the driver, the lieutenant, captain, chief, whatever position that is. If I didn't take the time to know what that position is, and I'm not educating myself on what decisions they're supposed to be making or any of those things, I have no leg to stand on. And I should probably just stop talking about it, because at that point, you're just being ignorant, right? You think you have all the answers, but you haven't even done the homework. And like Chief Isaacson says, everybody's got the test, or everybody's got the answers to the test until it's time to take the test. Well, that is the truth. We all sit and bitch and bitch and bitch. Oh, I would have done this, or I would have done that, or the Chiefs fucking up, or whatever. But we're not in that position, because I guarantee you, when you are in that position, it's your time to take the test, you're going to see things in a different light.
Well, plus we're all going to make mistakes. I think that's what we live in, a cancel culture society. And I've lost count. I think we can all lose count of how many good decisions we made, but also not so good decisions we made. And I mean, I remember some of the decisions I made in the heat of the battle. It's like, well, shit, I wasn't proud of that decision, or whatever it was. If I had the chance to do it over again, I would do it this way. And then sometimes you get the people coming up, because you mentioned approachability, which is great to have that approachability, but approachability is a two-way street. Number one, you got to be approachable, but you also got to be accepting the approach and not shutting people down. And there's times where lower ranking folks came up and they were maybe pissed at the decision I made as a captain or chief. And it's like, and knowing they're pissed after the fact is like, hey, I effed up on that one. I mean, if doing it over again, I wouldn't do it that way. And then there's, most people usually like, okay, hey, but here's why I made the decision in a short amount of time, because you may be in my position, or just you're wondering why I did it. Again, this is what I did based on the facts that I had in time. Would I do it over again differently? Yeah. And then there's others that still, well, it's like, no, what else do you want me to do? I apologize. I made a mistake. It's a teachable moment. And there's some people that get butthurt over that stuff. But I think that's the key to success, is being approachable. And there's a phrase that I was taught by one of the San Jose retired deputy chiefs, Jim Voyer: prompt for success. Prompting for success, meaning we're all going to make stupid mistakes, myself included, on a daily basis. Having that relationship and that approachability for someone to be able to call you out respectfully, tactfully. I mean, not like, you dumb idiot, but hey, have you considered this? Or, hey, you know what? You may not have seen this, but take a look at this, or whatever else. Again, not in the heat of the battle, unless it's really critically a safety issue or something else, but being open to somebody suggesting something. No different than driving. I use this example. When's the last time you've driven down the highway with your significant other? And of course, they've usually said, hey, slow down. You're doing whatever, 85 and a 45. Well, most of us think that's nagging, or, backseat driving and everything else. That was a prompt for success, really. We take it as, hey, shut the F up. If you want to drive, do it yourself. And of course, we know relationship challenges and arguments that then ensue. They're not doing it to jam you up or nag. They're trying to help you, save you from yourself. That's a prompt for success. And we can either be approachable and say, thank you, dear, I appreciate that, or why are you getting mad at them? They're trying to help you, save you from yourself. But the approachability is I think, is key. And I think it is easy to get disconnected in the sense that I, as a new fire officer years ago, thought I had to have, I was naive. I was young, thought I had to have all the answers. And it wasn't until, again, I realized I can't have all the answers. There's no way. But I got to know my lane of where my strengths are, but also my weaknesses, and be able to know how I can fill those gaps by those subject matter experts that I have at all ranks within my company, within other firehouses. And I may have to, tap them on the shoulder to help me out, versus just, I think I got to know it all. No, that's when leadership fails.
And it's 2 words: perspective and context. When we're talking about understanding each other, take the time to understand the other person's perspective and get the context. You talk about that firefighter bitching about the chief and this, that, and the other, and like, get the context. Something was said. Well, they said this. Well, what was the context? Because that drives, a lot of times things get taken out of context. Or people only get part of the perspective. They don't get the whole perspective, the whole story, and make these snap decisions. And it's amazing if you take the time to get the context, and a little bit of perspective goes a long way before we start spewing our daggers at people. And when, I'm guilty. I'll put my hand up and raise my hand and tell you right now, I've made those rush decisions because I didn't take the time. And I can tell you, it goes a long way to have a little bit of grace with each other, because eventually we're all going to need it, right? We're all going to screw up. We're all going to need that, hey, I'm sorry. And be willing to understand that people are not perfect. They're not infallible. And, even the best leaders make mistakes. And a lot of times the reason why they're such great leaders is because they've made mistakes along the ways and learned from those mistakes. And, that's the other thing too, is so, to keep in mind that nobody's infallible in this job. Ultimately, you're taking limited information a lot, especially in the emergency setting, and trying to make split decisions. And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. When you get it wrong, be approachable, like you said, Steve, to allow people to say, hey, you know what, I don't know if that was the best decision, and don't. It's easy to take offense to that, to become defensive when people bring that stuff to you. But go back, think about it. Maybe they're right, and if they are, hey, you know what, you were right, I was wrong. That goes a long way. But a transition here. I want to ask you, some thoughts on this. Obviously you've held different levels in the department, up to the deputy chief. But there are certainly challenges that are unique to, say, a lieutenant or captain or a battalion chief, deputy chief. As you progress from, line firefighter engineer to company officer to, shift, chief, battalion chief, division chief, whatever your rank structure is, then to an administrative position, whether it be training chief, deputy chief, administration, things like that. Leadership is obviously present in all those areas, but the challenges are probably a little different at those levels, I can imagine, as you move up. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. What are some of the things that you kind of stand out to you? We'll start with, let's say, with the company officer position. Steve, is a company officer, things that kind of stood out to you that are challenging in that particular rank, and things that you have to juggle and kind of overcome, and then as you progress in your career, how those things kind of, maybe things that stay the same and things that started to change as you moved up. I just want to get your perspective on that, because I do think that, you talk to people around the country of the job, as you move up, those layers get deeper, right? There's more layers. There's the window gets bigger, the overview gets bigger, and certainly to be effective as a leader in each one of those roles has its own unique things that have to be considered. And leadership is leadership, but how you interact with people at those different levels is maybe a little different.
Well, and that's a great question, because there are a lot of differences. And I think that some of the challenges I had as a new company officer was I got promoted to company officer with about 5 years on the job, give or take. And in our department, there was not uncommon to have officers with 4 or 5 years on the job. And, but then here I am with senior firefighters, 20, 25 years, 30 years, oh, good people. I tried too hard, I think, to try to convince them that I was qualified, because, hey, I remember I had one senior firefighter, you're too young to promote, you only got 5 years on the job. And I'm like, here's the challenge in our department. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't fight a lot of fire. It's not uncommon to go months without fire. I know it's strange that may seem for some people, but it's like the odds of being first due at a fire are pretty slim when you got, lack of fire or even significant incidents. I remember this one senior firefighter pulling me aside, and he's like, Steve, he goes, you need like 20 years on the job to, before you consider promoting to captain. I'm like, well, shit. Okay. Whether I have 5 or 10 in our department, it's not going to provide that much more significant incident experience. Now it'll provide more experiences, obviously dealing with people, but from the command perspective, the odds of getting a lot more action is pretty slim. And obviously, if you want to promote through the ranks, because again, naively, I thought years ago I had to be a fire chief to make positive change, when against the slap in the face going, no, sometimes it's hard as the fire chief, because you've got so many people, so many stakeholders, union, city, that you can't get a shit done. Whereas sometimes a lot of the shit gets done at lower levels or from the union or whatever else. But anyway, but then I'm going, okay, if I spend 20 years as a firefighter, and then what? I got to spend 10 years as a captain. Well, then I got 30 years in, and then that means I'm be a fire chief 50 years on the job, which is unrealistic. Again, so it's like, so the challenges were I tried too hard. And I think that's that getting back to should have done a better job of just realizing that, okay, I got to do a better job at team building and interacting. Because one of the challenges I realized was just because sometimes people have 20, 30 years on the job doesn't mean they have 20, 30 years of experience. in any rank, any position. So challenges I think I had, it's easier because you only got 1, 2, 3 people you're usually supervising on an engine, a truck, or whatever else it is. But trying to at least make sure that, the old saying, buddy to boss. Buddy to boss can be a struggle because, again, you're still with the same crew at the kitchen table, inside the same rig, same firehouse. And 1 minute it's like you're at the kitchen table, maybe talking shit about something. Someone crosses the line, and you've got to be the designated adult now as the officer to be able to say, hey, let's just ixnay on the conversation there. Let's just change course, whatever else, which you may have talked shit 2 days ago as a firefighter. And then now you got to say, hey, you know what? That's going a little bit wrong direction. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, hey, Rick, who you just called out, can you pass the potatoes, please? Get your own freaking potatoes here, because now that person's butt hurt because you called them out because they expect you still to be the buddy. And I think that's that challenge of, you can't be that one person as a firefighter and then, oh, I'm the boss now. See, I got the bugles and I got the responsibility. And so if you're a clown on this end here, you can't necessarily now be an officer and still expect respect. So the old saying, walk the walk, talk the talk, I think is critical as we move forward through our lives. Have fun, no doubt, but just be careful. Well, then you get the struggle of getting a battalion chief, for example, where you're managing usually multiple companies, multiple personalities. But you're also balancing that fine line with administration because a captain's stuck in the middle. Captain, you've got your crew you've got to be loyal to, but also to administration. But a BC shift commander, you're really stuck in the middle because you want to take care of your troops, but then now you're trying to take care of admin and command staff because in a small department, there'd be maybe a fire chief, maybe a deputy or second in charge assistant, whatever that rank's called, and then it's battalion chief. So you are the command team. And it's tough because it's very easy to say, well, you drank the Kool-Aid because now you're having to hold us accountable. Everyone wants accountability until you got to hold them accountable. They want somebody else held accountable. And now you're the asshole because you held them accountable. And it's like, no, I'm doing, it's hard because you didn't forget where you came from, but you got different responsibilities now as that supervisor. And just one little thing to connect here, the challenges of going from buddy to boss. There was back 3 years ago when we were dealing with all this crazy pandemic stuff that, thank God, knock on wood, I hope we never deal with that stuff in our lifetime again. There was some positives, taught me empathy, taught me compassion, a lot of other things. I'm not trying to pick sides or anything else, but there was a story that came out of, I think it was a department in Florida where this battalion chief in a large department, the board of supervisors for this huge department made a decision of mandatory vaccinations for the personnel, whether you agree or disagree. That was the decision made above the chief. My chief had to deal with the same thing too. In this department like mine, I think there was like about 90% people vaccinated, about 10 people that weren't, 10% not vaccinated. So this Florida battalion chief was told, you've got to go issue written reprimands to these whatever small segment of the department or your battalion, your shift that are not vaccinated. Now, they weren't going to get fired. They weren't going to get suspended, demoted. It was just, if you're not vaccinated and you don't provide a religious excuse or whatever that's considered valid, you're going to get a written reprimand that goes in your file. I mean, at the end of the day, it's in your file. I mean, hopefully it doesn't go against you. But anyway, this battalion chief was supposed to do that. Those were his marching orders. This battalion chief decided to just, you know what, I'm not going to do my job. I'm going to basically resign before I I think he got fired over that one. But when this came out in the news, of course, from a firefighter angle, thinking task level, not tactical, not strategic, this guy is a hero because he wasn't enforcing the written reprimands that his bosses told him to do for these, small amount of the population that weren't vaccinated. Well, from a strategic point, this guy is the firefighter of the year. He's the chief of the year. Well, guess what the next chief that gets promoted is going to have to do? The job that this guy didn't do. To me, that's selfish to have to pass the buck, pass the baton. It's also insubordinate. And part of, unfortunately, being a company officer and a chief officer is ensuring people are following policy. It's the unsexy, unfun stuff. If everyone's following policy and doing the job, your job's easy. But enforcing policy, that battalion chief doesn't have to agree with the decisions made above his or her head, but there's a time and a place that the comment period is over and they've got to do their job. Well, by saying, screw it, fire my ass or I'm going to resign, well, now I'm the next battalion chief and I'm the bad guy that has to go issue the reprimands, because if I'm going to get promoted, the chief's going to ask me, hey, are you going to do your job? And I think that's as we try to transition from company officer challenges to battalion chief up to deputy chief challenges, there's a lot of things we may have to do that we don't agree with, that are maybe not amongst our moral beliefs or whatever else, but we accepted the oath of office, whether it's to be a firefighter, to take that promotion to whatever rank that we have. And sometimes we got to be that bearer of bad news and do our jobs. And it sucks because I don't want to be that guy that gets anybody in trouble. But so long story short, and then you get to deputy chief, the challenges are even more so because there's just the higher workload. Usually you're answering more to the city level, the whatever board of supervisors, and it's just every rank has challenges. So in a nutshell, it's just, and it's harder to stay connected with the boots on the ground folks that you want to not forget where you came from and you want to stay connected, but you also then get considered to be one of them. You didn't go from buddy to boss, you went from boss to dark side, as I say.
No, that's awesome. Now I will say this, probably an unpopular opinion, and I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole on this, but like you said, you accepted that oath, you accepted that position. That is something that you consciously did. So if at any point that is no longer what you want to do, I think the question is, what do I do now? Because just as nobody forced you to take that position, nobody's forcing you to hold that position either. So I think a lot of people feel conflicted when situations arise like that, and they don't really do that deep soul searching of, where am I in my career? Is this position necessarily for me anymore? Has it served its purpose? Has my values and everything changed? And if the answer is yes, then I think we also need to normalize telling people that there's no shame in saying, hey, I don't want this position anymore. I think I'm going to go back down. And for some people, I think that is seen as failure, especially among their peers. Oh, they couldn't hack it or whatever. And I honestly think that's probably one of the most respectful and probably reasonable things that someone could do. Because one, it's not an easy decision to make, but two, understanding like, hey, those decisions are just not for me. I don't want to enforce those on people. I think I'm good. Those are the moments that I think shine light on what a good culture in an organization can create. Because you know what, you shot your shot, and you did it, and for whatever reason things have changed, and that's okay. People change, situations change, whatever. So I just wanted to throw that out there that if anybody is struggling with that position, then it's okay to do that soul searching and say, hey, you know what, this is not me anymore.
Well, we don't know what we don't know. And I think that's the biggest thing that most people, if you are having that aspiration to take whatever next step is, take the time to do your homework, do your research, talk to people in those positions, find your mentors. Again, you'll never know everything until you're in that position, but you can learn a lot about, like that example that I share there is like, there are a lot of people that, I wouldn't want to be in that position, but I also understood that if I was a battalion chief or deputy chief or even a fire chief, I may have to be in that position at some point, as sucky as that is, but let's hope it doesn't happen. But sometimes I'll have to have intestinal fortitude, as they say, to do my job, but it's okay. But even with all that, there's times you get there and you're like, this is not what I expect. And we've all known those people that have self-demoted, if that is allowed. San Jose Fire had a guy that went from second in charge assistant chief, not just back to deputy chief, but back to field battalion chief. Talk about jumps. And I remember just talking to him briefly on it. He goes, and I'm like, jokingly said, why'd you even take the second in command position? He goes, because pretty much nobody else wanted it. They were talking about going outside. It was one of those things where, like, I'm not ready, and really, I don't want to go in the office full time with that big of a department, the stress. And he goes, but at the time the chief was like, hey, you know what, I really need you to step up. And it's like, okay, I'll do it. But then he got in that position. He's like, oh shit. And I don't think anybody's giving him shit, because they realized his skill set was probably he did a great job, but he was probably better suited back to that shift battalion chief, and probably from a mental wellness standpoint. And of course, there's always somebody that's going to fill. There's always somebody behind us that they'll find a person to fill the spot, good or bad. But there's no shame in just saying that, I think. And that's the true leader of one, because you got to be a leader of one, doing the right things before you can have any followers, or doing the right things. And knowing sometimes when to step back to step ahead. And step ahead, even if it just means staying in his position as a battalion chief through the rest of his career, as long as he's still engaged, doing the best he can to support the community, support the everybody in the department and so forth. So that takes a lot. But unfortunately, like we've all known those people that stayed too long at the party when it's like they probably should just, you know what, either resigned or hey, time to retire now or move on to whatever else it is, because you never want to be that person.
It takes a lot of courage and humility to
Mhm.
say, you know what, this isn't for me. You know, I'm going to go back to where I know that I'm
Yeah.
most effective and most fulfilled. And you know, people will say, "Oh, they couldn't hack it." Maybe you know, for some people, it's just like, "Hey, you know what? This is not my cup of tea. It's not what I expected." Or I did it, like you said, to fill a hole because that's all we, you know, nobody else wanted it, and I really didn't want to see them go outside or whatever. I mean, there's a myriad of factors that go into that, but there's no shame in saying, you know what, uh, you know, this is not what I want anymore. And I think like there's a certain amount of you gotta give some kudos to character for that person to recognize that, you know, and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to take a step back here. And I think people, you know, you talk about taking a step back to go ahead, to move forward, to you know, win long term. And I think people think that if you're not constantly moving up, you're not going to win the game, so to speak. And I use that loosely but think about this in chess. Sometimes you have to move backwards,
Right.
right? Just strategically move back or take a step back to get ahead, right? It's the same thing in life and our careers, right? Sometimes, you know, taking a step back, looking at your strategies, you know, there are things that happen where, you know, people may say that's a step back, but maybe in the long run, it's actually a better strategy for longevity, for success. And that's the thing what people got to remember is, you know, for people listening, there's this principle called the Peter Principle. I'm sure, Steve, you're familiar with it. You know, basically it talks about how the people tend to rise to their level of respective incompetence.
Uh-huh.
And you know, you go until you get to a point where you're like, oh, you know, you might have been a great firefighter, a great engineer, a great company officer, a great battalion chief, and then you get in this administrative position, and it's like, I'm mediocre at best. like I've hit my plateau. And this is where I'm going. And I'm not knocking that because I think everybody has different roles. You talk about some people, you know, should promote. Some people, you know,
Oh, yeah.
this is where they excel and they do well. And you know, maybe, and I've had this conversation before. There are people who, you know, are fantastic company officers that don't excel as a chief officer. They struggle in that role. Or there are people as battalion chiefs that, you know, in that line battalion going into an administrative battalion chief, they just really struggle with that transition. And I think like that's where being true to yourself, like Sean said probably half an hour ago now, being true to yourself, being honest with yourself, having those real conversations, in sticking, you know, here's the thing, like we should always be trying to push ourselves out of our comfort zone because that's where growth happens. But when you're in that point, you know, when you get to that point of pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, there is a point where you go, hey, you know
Mhm.
what? I recognize my limitations, right? And you got two choices at that point. You can work to overcome those limitations, augment. Uh, you know, certainly is the number one choice thing that most of us should try to take it. But if you get to a point where you realize, like, hey, like
Mhm.
I have reached an uncomfortable level here. Like I'm, you know, this is not my cup of tea.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I was better in this role. And you know, I've given it an honest effort. And that's the thing. Can you look yourself in the mirror and say, I gave it my all and an honest effort? But then realizing, like, you know, you talk about the Chiefs that maybe should have, you know, taken a step back or, you know, tapping out. I'm done with the party. You know, it's they get to that point where now it's just stagnating and it's affecting culture in the department because they've kind of plateaued and not been able to rise above that. And I've seen this. I've seen this with Chiefs that they take the job because you know, they thought they wanted. They get in there, but now they can't go back, man, because that would be like, you know, you were the fire chief and then you took a step back or you retired early or whatever. And like people are gonna, you know, they don't want to let go. They don't want to let go of that. You know, there's too much pride. There's too much ego entailed in that in that, and they won't do it. And so what happens? They stay, and they stay, and they drive the organization off the cliff because they are too proud to say, you know what, I've hit my plateau, I've hit my mark here, and it's time for somebody else to, I've done what I've set out to do, or whatever, I've accomplished what I've set out to accomplish. Recognizing that transition, the baton passing, when it's time to step aside and let somebody else take it to the next level. And if we're truly leaders, right? We talked about this earlier, we're investing in our people so that they are better than us. And it's okay to recognize like someone else has a talent for some, whatever it is. Let's say you get promoted to battalion chief of special ops or whatever, but you're not a special ops guy, and you're not strong in high angle rescue and confined space and all this stuff. And not saying you have to be the guy for everything, but if you have somebody, let's say another battalion chief who's a line battalion chief, who is really into that stuff and who's got a knack for that kind of stuff and has that kind of mind, to me, there's nothing wrong with going, as a couple of chief officers to the fire chief and saying, we should switch.
Yeah.
Because I will excel way better there and he will excel way better here. It's what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing wrong with making those moves. And I think like recognizing like what your strengths and weaknesses are. For example, if you're somebody who has a love and a passion for EMS, a chief of EMS, man, that makes sense, right? That just it's a better fit than somebody who has, barely squeaked through paramedic school, like held the certificate because they had to, and could care two shits about that particular facet of the job. Like, not saying they don't care, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if their passion, their heart is not in that role, they're not going to do as well as somebody who is really, really into that particular facet of the job. And I think like that's where, we're a team, right? Using your people to the best of their abilities. If you have people that fit, and I understand there are times where people have to fill roles that they're not necessarily crazy about. That is part of taking that promotion and saying, hey, I got promoted to be a, battalion chief of operations or a line guy, line battalion. And now they want me to be in a 40-hour training officer position or whatever. I think you definitely have to step outside your comfort zone and be willing to take those roles if the chief says, hey, I need you to fill this role, but understand, like I said, your limitations, and go into that with that honest mindset of like, hey, how do I overcome and be the best that I can be? And then when the time is right and there's a chance to move to a position where you are more passionate or more, better, in a better fit, I think like you got to seize those opportunities when they're available. But I mean, like, I just want your thoughts on that. I know it's a long way around to say it's okay to recognize your strengths and weaknesses. It's okay to step outside your comfort zone, but also understand when you're in a place where maybe somebody else would take the organization farther, would be able to make the organization move in the right direction. And I think like it's hard, right? It's hard for us to admit that, hey, this guy's probably a better fit at this than I am. Or, hey, you know what? I was way happier and more fulfilled and more successful at this role. And like that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. Like I said, there's a lot of ego that goes into that. There's a lot of pride in like, you feel like a failure, when in all reality, are you really a failure? To me, you're failing if you continue to, stay in a position where you're miserable and you're failing and you don't care and you're burnout, and like that's failing the organization more than being honest and going back to a role that fits your skill set better.
So many great points to build off there. Ego and pride, as much as it's funny because a lot of times leaders, especially at higher ranks in any organization, any line of work, get sometimes bashed for their ego. Well, you got to look at it two ways. For anyone to transcend or ascend to any high up position, not just in the fire service, but any line of work, you got to have ego. Well, as Chief Bernstein, God rest his soul, you say, don't let your ego eat your brains, obviously, because unfortunately, sometimes the ego is eaten. But ego is just a fact of life. We all have it. And pride gets in the way. But I'm chuckling because part of the challenges we have sometimes is our structure. Now, if you talk to a lot of like union members, they want structure. We've got our rules. We've got, whether it's seniority based stuff, whether it's whatever, civil service rules. Those are all great, but sometimes we have to adjust things to do what's right. We can't just stick to the old fashioned rules. I'll use an example. I remember walking into our we've changed we used to have, well, we still do shift battalion chiefs, then some 40-hour office battalion chiefs, career development positions. And at one time, there was only one 40-hour office position. It was the EMS coordinator. When I got hired, It was just BLS department. Well, when we became an ALS department, we created the 40-hour EMS battalion chief. Well, I remember like one of the first battalion chiefs, it was the voluntold position. Basically, it's like, okay, you're the junior one, you're going in there, you're going to do 2 years. And then, of course, when you get out, someone else will get promoted and the new kid will go in there. And whether or not they're paramedic, well, this one battalion chief, sharp dude, he promoted up higher even, but he was never a paramedic, but he'd worked in a paramedic system in his former department that merged with us. I remember walking into his office one day with a paramedic issue when I was a firefighter paramedic. And I go, hey, what are the numbers on your calendar? Because his calendar had like the Black L Marco countdown. I go, what's the 243? He goes, that's the number of days to my 2-year assignment is up. And I'm like, oh, well, you can obviously imagine what passion and enthusiasm he had for EMS when, of course, his statement was basically EMS for the last letters of the word problems. Well, and then as much as people complain about, well, we got to have seniority based, we got to have, he was the junior battalion chief. That's just the way it works. Like we were joking about earlier, that's the way it is. We'll always work that way. How about we find one of those people that's actually, number one, hopefully been a paramedic, hopefully is passionate about EMS, and not just relying on the junior person that wants the badge bad enough to become a gold badge, but then they'll do their 2-year stint, get back to the line, kick, yay, and then, I want to get back to the line too, trust me. But so that is just so critical. But I think going back to what you mentioned, I think recognizing when you've exceeded your shelf life, and this is going to come across weird. I recently did one on my YouTube page, one of these videos. I was not planning on retiring. I was hoping to work for maybe 5 more years, give or take. And I always said, as long as I'm hopefully making a positive difference, hopefully I'm not getting, I'm not retired in place. I'm not like you said, status quo and all that stuff. If I can at least think I'm doing the right things and not clogging up the pipeline, I want to stay. Well, I don't think I was clogging up the pipeline, but it really dawned on me that after having been a deputy chief for 10 years, I was the junior person on the command staff. And now I'm the senior person, not by rank, but the senior one in age. And there's great, talented people in the department. I felt myself when I looked at what I was enjoying doing versus what I was not enjoying doing. And I was enjoying obviously going to fires and doing the fun shit. But when it came to what I didn't enjoy doing, budgets, occasional personnel issues, staff reports, all this administrative stuff, again, which I signed up for and I knew I was getting into, it was like, when we get hired in the fire service, we don't sign up to drive a desk. We sign up to have fun and do fun shit. But then obviously we take, sometimes things fall in our lap. Sometimes we're asked to do things. Sometimes we choose to do things. And again, I'm not complaining. I was very fortunate, blessed to do everything I've done. And and just a sidetrack, if we were a department that ran 10, 15 calls a day, fought fire daily, I probably never would have promoted to a firefighter or maybe captain, because that would have been fun to run calls all day, even in my 50s. But again, we were a slow department. And it was like, you know what? I want to take those next steps. I like being part of the bigger solution. But anyway, knowing when you've exceeded your shelf life is critical. And there was a great deputy chief to pass the baton to. Mark Shoemate took over for me. And, he's taken the training division to the next level, as I would expect him to do. And then whoever replaces him whenever he retires. And I think that was the key. When I was going for deputy chief, I was trying to be very cautious because the fire chief used to be the training deputy chief. So I'm taking his spot because he got promoted. And I was dancing around because I didn't want to throw him under the bus. But he goes, no, I want you to take the training division to the next level, make me look like a piece of shit, and do it even better. And then, of course, when you transition to the next position, whether it's ops or whatever else, hopefully your replacement does the same thing. So knowing when you've exceeded your shelf life, I think and it happens, whether it's your shelf life in life, whatever that is, or whatever career you're in, whether it's teaching, whether it's, a firefighter, or maybe I thought I exceeded my shelf life as a firefighter, so I want to take the next step to company officer, so I think those are all critical factors that require us to reflect and just do a lot of soul searching. I think that doesn't happen because I know a lot of people have like gold badge-itis. I get a lot of people that, what's the fast track to, you'd be amazed the amount of people that reach out that I'm fortunate. What's the fast track to whatever, getting hired as a firefighter or getting promoted, becoming a fire chief? There is no there are fast tracks. Some people have done them, but usually it means going to another department and you're crashing and burning and now you're out of a job. And it's one thing in your own department, like we talked about, if you can self-demote, but so many people today want to get to the top and they go to another department. And the next thing you know, they get in the crosshairs, like you mentioned, of whoever, union, city, and then it's like, well, shit. I mean, you're out of a job, and I know a lot of those people, sad to say, because they didn't just step back and just, you know what, slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say this. I'll turn it over to Sean. First of all, I call that staph infection. That's what we call it. People getting those high up, administrative positions, they forget where they come from. It's called staph infection. But anyway, I digress. But on the note of recognizing shelf life, understanding your skill sets, your strengths and weaknesses, right? We are all part of the same team, right? And every team has different roles, different responsibilities, right? We see it in organized sports. We still see it in the military. We see it across multiple platforms and spectrums, different businesses in this country. And the fire service is no different. What do you suppose would be the outcome if you took a guy who's a really good lineman and you put him in quarterback? Or you take the catcher and the pitcher and tell him to switch places, right? The best teams put their people in the best position to succeed. I'm not saying that if everybody knows where those pitches should go, it's that catcher, right? That catcher knows where those pitches need to be. But their skill sets are different. They're different skill sets. They understand the pitcher's position and what needs to happen, right? But they're in the pitcher's on the mound and they're at the plate because that's where their skill sets excel. That's where they're their best. And that's where, as a fire service, we have to understand this plug and play mindset with our officers and our chiefs and stuff like that. I don't like it. I don't like this plug and play. Like, yeah, you're a battalion chief. A battalion chief is a battalion chief is a battalion chief, and saying, you know what, you're going into training for 2 years. You're going into inspections. You're doing this. You're doing that, and just plug and play. You do 2 years. You do 2 years. Well, that may give you a broad spectrum, and there are some benefits to that. The downside to that is when you're forcing people into roles that their skill sets are weakest in, right? Or that they just have no passion or real, and I get it. Someone's got to fill those roles. And certainly if nobody's willing to, stepping up, then there's got to be like, hey, someone's got to do that. But what I'm saying is, man, the best organizations, you're looking for opportunities to put your people in a place to win. You're looking for an opportunity to put them in a position to excel. And that's what I'm getting at is as a team, we got to be careful of this plug and play mindset, and we see it all the time with fire departments with staffing, guys floating from house to house, company to company. There's no continuity. There's no, you know what I'm saying? You're just a body in a seat mindset. And that is dangerous to me. That is dangerous when you just take this plug and play mindset to the fire. And I get it from a city standpoint, from a managerial standpoint, they're just looking at dollar signs and bodies and seats. But as a chief officer, and I'm not one, and I have not been one, but it just seems like when that happens, there's a breakdown between the guys, the boots on the ground, and the guys at the top. And I understand you do have a responsibility to staff fire trucks. You do have a responsibility to staff those positions. But man, if we should, at least in my mindset, maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me what you think on this, Steve. But if I have an opportunity as a chief officer to put my people in a position to win, I'm going to do it as much as I can, as much as possible. I want to put people in those, give them the opportunities where their skill sets shine, where they are absolutely kicking ass and taking names. That to me is how you win as an organization. Because if people are happy in their role and they're fulfilled and they feel like, man, I'm doing something I really care about, that goes a long way in morale. It goes a long way in culture, and the product on the field is going to be better. Sure. Yeah. You know what? I play first base, but you're going to put me in the outfield. You know what? I can get it done. That's great. That's not where my passion is. I'm going to do better if I care about what I'm doing, if I'm bought into where I'm at now. I'm not saying as a coach that sometimes they go, hey, you know what? You would actually be a better fit over here. There's have to be those hard conversations too. It's a two-way street. But I want to get your thoughts on that, because I really do think that sometimes, we've almost got too white collar in our mindset in the fire service, where it's just plug and play. People, you signed up for this job, that whatever it comes with, blah, blah, blah. If I tell you to go inspections, that's where you're going. If I tell you to go to EMS, that's where you're going. And certainly that is the prerogative of the fire chief and the people in the upper echelon positions. But man, how much do we kind of cripple ourselves by by forcing people into roles that they just simply do not want or simply are not skilled in. Does that really, I mean, is that something that you've seen that maybe actually hurts the organization? You talked about that guy in training where he's just like, I got my calendar countdown, and when I get out of this role, like, isn't that counterproductive? Isn't that kind of counterintuitive as an organization to have that mindset? And like I said, this is from a fireman looking up. I've never been a chief, but I just want to get your perspective on that, because I feel like I hear so many stories like this around the country. It's like at some point you think we'd all take a step back and say, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this?
All great points and all reality 101 for today's world in fire service. But what needs to be part of the conversation is this is not always a management driven thing. A lot of times it's a labor driven thing. Like, I'll use the example of our labor group using that battalion chief position. We actually were able to get a few more battalion chief 40-hour positions because we figured career development, large organizations. We also got a 40-hour ops BC to help work with the deputy chief of ops, a training BC, which helped me as the training chief to help me give me more bandwidth. Well, again, the career development. But anyway, from the labor perspective, the way it was initially worked out is that when you got promoted, you would go into one of those spots unless one of those people wanted to stay there and wanted to go more than 2 years. But labor had to be the one that had to see at the table and said, you know what, if you're going to force someone into a 40-hour admin position at the new position they're in, whether it's a captain or whether it's a BC, how about giving them a year in the field first, so at least they can get their feet wet in the field before they go into the office. So we changed that. We had no problem with that. We don't care as long as we get people. The reason we have these positions is, number one, to help support the organization, help support shit that needs to get done in the field. But also it's there to give career development opportunities, because good, bad, or indifferent, for those that do want to go up to the higher ranks, like you mentioned earlier, it can be painful for some going to a 40-hour position, but you do learn a lot. I mean, good, bad, or indifferent, you learn more about the organization. The fire department, as much as we want to think it's operational based, it is operational based, but we also have things that need to support the operational base, whatever programs, divisions there are. So, like, I had a battalion chief, fast forward, coming into training, and he was the junior guy. He did 1 year of BC time in the field, and then it was, of course, a vacancy pops up. I knew he'd be the guy coming into training because he's the lowest in the barrel. And I go, hey, looking forward to have you come in. And he's trying to do everything he can. I need to be out in the field. I suck at administrative stuff. I go, well, you're going to learn. I go, I'm here to help you. We have great admin assistants to help you. You're going to broaden your horizons for 2 years. This is the way the system works. And he's kicking and screaming. I'm like, you're preaching the choir, dude. This is what the labor group wanted, because the labor group recognizes the value of having these positions, number one, so we don't have to have civilians. And they recognize the point of career development. Do your 2 years. You're going to go kicking and screaming out of here, and you're going to realize it was painful, but it was actually, I go, we're the same people. I mean, we're good people. I mean, we got a good team here in the office and training. But anyway, sometimes those things are necessary. But here, what you had mentioned about putting the right people in the right position, like I said, sometimes labor can be the challenge. And again, because we're so stuck sometimes in seniority and or whatever. Well, these are the rules. Well, maybe the rules need to be changed, because on one hand, you ask a firefighter at the kitchen table in any firehouse across the country, who's going to make the great next company officer? And who are they going to say? Usually the kick-ass firefighter, in their opinion, is going to be the next kick-ass company officer, or the kick-ass captain is going to be the kick-ass battalion chief. We all know in reality, just because you're a rock star at your current rank, like you mentioned, the Peter principle, doesn't mean you're going to be a rock star. At some point, maybe that was your rock star rank, was firefighter or driver. And I think that's the problem in the fire service we have today, is, or in any organization, of like, oh, he's awesome because of whatever. He's awesome. Well, remember, every step we go up has different skill sets. The skill set of a firefighter or driver is a lot different than the skill set of a administrative company officer, which, good, bad, or different, you are administrative along with all those other supervisory, management, leadership responsibilities. Sometimes the best people at higher ranks were maybe adequate, decent in their lower ranks, but they excelled as they got up. They're exceptions. So this is what I think people need to keep in mind, of that different skill sets. Just because someone's a great rock star doesn't mean they're going to be a great at whatever. And sometimes they shouldn't be in that position. One of our retired assistant chiefs, I got passed over for a position one time, and it was a high up deputy chief position before I got promoted to deputy chief. And he goes, Steve, he goes, like your baseball analogy. He goes, Steve, today, he goes, you're a great third baseman, say. He goes, but today we needed a great catcher. That person was a better fit for their skill set. I mean, that's the challenge. Like in our department with company officers, because of the labor agreements, which are not bad, we can't always put people in the right places. At least in the 40-hour administrative positions, we can, because you're an at-will employee. You're no longer represented by the unions. That's why when I got deputy chief of training, I thought the senior BC was going to kick my ass and get the spot, but the fire chief goes, no, he'll probably get the ops chief spot first. You're the guy that has the training background, the training experience. I need you in training right now to fill that void. But again, because I was unrepresented, because I was a management position as a deputy chief, the chief had the flexibility. So that's why a lot of times at the lower levels, you don't recognize those things, but you also got to recognize that if you do go to those higher positions, the chief may say, hey, you know what? I know training is your specialty and I should keep you there. But like he told me, he goes, you've done training for 3 years now. You've got it down. You're not perfect. You're not kicking ass necessarily. My ego wasn't telling me I was awesome at it, but he goes, I need you to get more well-rounded because you've got whatever 10 more years to go. So I want to put you in ops now to broaden your horizons, which shit, I'll take ops. Then of course, 3 years later in the conversation, hey, you've done ops, you've done training, and I need now move into admin, which is like, huh? Seriously? It'll broaden your horizons, especially if you want to be a fire chief. Well, I maybe don't want to be a fire chief, but it's like I did learn a lot. It was painful, but so long story short, there's so much in that conversation that you had there that, but yeah, in a perfect world, we put people in the right positions, but sometimes we're hamstrung. But if we're hamstrung, maybe we need to look at how do we change it? Maybe it's because I hate to say it, from a lot of times from the management level, it's like an overtime position. Like when I was a battalion chief, sometimes like, I don't care who fills the position. I mean, I don't mean it in a bad, negative way. If I don't care who fills the position, it's just butts in the seats. If you two want to switch it around, if you're the special ops guy and you should be on the truck, I'm following the rules that are put forth by the labor group when it comes to staffing. I don't think it's the best person to be in that position, but they're qualified because they're a member of that rank. But if you two want to switch spots because you're a better fit or it's your firehouse, shit, go for it as long as we're good. So it's, I don't say slippery slope. It's just, you said earlier, the context needs to be taken in that sometimes management don't care, but sometimes their hands are tied. But change it. If there's a better way, see what we can do to change it.
Yeah, I think this conversation has been a great one and hopefully eye-opening to a lot of people. But reality is there are some things we can change, there are some things we can't. But you'd be surprised the amount of influence you can have if you just tried, right? And I think that's the context of everything we're discussing today is just put forth your best effort. I think that's all anyone's asking, and be real with yourself. Sometimes your best effort may not be enough, and you got to understand that too. Like, hey, maybe that's where I want to be, but I'm not quite developed to that point yet. So I have to take a step back, fix myself, work on myself, and then regroup, and then we'll try again. And like you said, there is some fast tracks if that's what you want, but even then it's not a fast track because you're going to find out really quick what you don't know and what you're not ready for. So just do the work. That's it. Do the work. Especially when it comes to change, do the work that other people are not willing to do. So, with that said, we've been almost 2 hours. Doesn't seem that long, but so I'm gonna shift gears here a little bit, and I'm gonna ask you some questions. That's generally what we do when we close it out, right? We have the like couple questions that I ask, couple questions that Nick asks, so. Generally call it rapid fire, but I like to hear what you have to say, so I'm not really worried about locking into the 60 seconds. Nick gets pissed when I say that because he says, no, it's 60 seconds. But are you ready for some questions?
Bring it.
Awesome. So we talked about a lot about leadership, and obviously our listeners and everybody have come to know you a little bit throughout this course. You have held many positions, right? And many leadership positions. So my question to you is, what have you found to been one of the most challenging parts of leading in any position that you've been in?
One of the most challenging things, I think, like Sean touched on, Sean, what Nick touched on earlier, as I teach on every session I'm fortunate to teach, is having the courage to sometimes raise your hand to say yes or no, whatever it is. Because when you put yourself out there against the grain, being that one person, thankfully it doesn't happen all the time. It's rare, but sometimes someone has to be that person that puts their big boy pants on. And I'm not, and I think that's been challenging for me because I've tried so hard to, I don't want to say be one of the guys, but not forget where I came from. But a lot of people sometimes think, well, now the chief, I remember hearing one time one of our really good chiefs that was respected as a firefighter was now the fire chief. And someone goes, he forgot where he came from after he made a decision. I'm like, no, he didn't forget where he came from. He's still the same chief. But now he's got 5 bosses. He doesn't have union protection anymore. He's also got more things he's trying to take into account. Yeah, you may not like the decision, but you know what? It's for the greater good of the organization, at least the 50.1. And I think that's the biggest challenge for me, is that I could have done a better job was recognizing that, yeah, sometimes I got to have that courage to raise my hand to whatever it is, yes, no, or change course, stop course, whatever else. And that's why I try to give back in that fashion with every class I teach, is having that courage, because again, it doesn't matter what rank it is. It takes courage to be a leader in today's world, knowing that you're going to potentially piss off some people. And as you said earlier, Sean, it gets a little lonely at times, but you got to be on your deathbed knowing that you did the right thing for the right reasons. And sometimes it means pissing people off on occasion. If you're pissing them off all the time, you're the problem. If you're never pissing people off, you're the problem too. I mean, I think there was those times where I was never pissing anybody off because I was trying to walk every line. And then unfortunately, it doesn't show good leadership, I don't think.
Yeah, I was once told, if everyone likes you, you're probably not worth being liked. So, that's something that always sat with me. But my second question is, and I don't think we really got to really touch on this in the episode, is you have a few books, right?
Yeah.
What made you want to write a book?
It's funny, and I'm not sure if you were on the line when I started with this, giving my background, but back when I was that aspiring firefighter, soaking in firehouse fire engineering, reading all the articles before the internet, I had that desire to be an instructor, at least at the college level, helping the future, and then eventually, obviously, helping all ranks. Well, after looking at all the fire engineering and firehouse magazines, I was one of those guys, not everybody is, but I'm like, you know what? I got a lot of ideas. And when firehouse.com came about in 2002, which seems like yesterday, but firehouse.com was a big announcement. I remember reading in the magazine going, we're starting a website, which is just hilarious for people obviously today, but it's like, we're looking for authors and all these different subject matters. And I'm like, well, obviously leadership, I'm just a firefighter. And then it was like, oh, career development. Well, that was sort of my foot in the door. Well, I started writing like whatever blogs for Firehouse magazine. Well, I started putting together just like whatever on paper. I'd have time in my hands. I'd write a couple pages on whatever, and next thing you know, I had all this stuff I just enjoyed writing. And then it's like, well, hell, I'll send an article into fire engineering, and a couple get rejected. They accept it. Oh, and I started getting some success from Firehouse and Fire Engineering magazine, as well as the website. Well, then fast forward to when it comes time to putting a book together, I realized at some point, I got a lot of shit here on paper, and I don't want it to go to waste, good, better, and different. But then this is before self-publishing, and this is before the ease of getting, and of course, at the time, it was all, major publishers, which I'm like, there's no way in hell a firefighter or a captain's going to get a book publishing deal, because there's not a lot of publisher out there fire related. I mean, they're not. So anyway, my first things were really because of I took a collection of all the stuff I had put together from all my website articles and all the other blogs I had, and started packaging it to some entry-level firefighter preparation books, along with the promotional preparation stuff that I had. And next thing I know, I've got a couple books, that are a couple hundred pages just from all my thoughts that I added to it. I like writing. I mean, sort of hate it now, but I don't mind. I mean, I don't mind it. But back then I got all this knowledge or thoughts up here on put on paper, and hopefully somebody reads and cares about it. If not, that's cool too. So one thing led to another, and it wasn't until another friend of mine goes, you got to get that shit published. And I go, I don't want to submit to Fire Engineering, because they were the only book publishing fire related, because of all the requirements. I go, I got manuscripts. And he finally told me, just self-publish them. Well, this is about 10 years ago when self-publishing was a lot easier. And I can put things on a Word document, but I can't make it look pretty, meaning package it up and make it look actually Barnes & Noble professional, I guess. But anyway, I paid some money to have a self-publishing company help me, and the books are still out there. And then after I had those 3 self-published books, then Fire Engineering, I had a conversation with them and I go, hey, I've already self-published some stuff. I've got a whole shitload of other thoughts that I've already put together over the years, just, traveling on planes, downtime on planes, whatever else, killing time. And they liked what they saw. So they published my 4th book. And then I've got a 5th book from Fire Engineering coming out hopefully soon on Courage Under Fire Leadership. Again, just all collections of stuff that were maybe like articles or blogs or whatever, or just random thoughts that just next thing you know, that one page leads to 2, leads to 10, leads to 20. And now thanks to either self-publishing companies or like Fire Engineering, they can make it look pretty and professional versus what I could on an 8x10 white document with black text.
Nice. Yeah, I was always curious about that process because, maybe one day. But I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are in that same boat. Like, hey, I got a lot to say and I want to share it, but I don't know where to start. So what better person to ask? So
no, and sure, I'll share my contact information at the end, but please, I get these questions all the time from whatever, and I'm more than happy to offer my opinions on good, bad, or indifferent. If people want a resource, I'm a resource. Please feel free, or don't feel free. I'm good with that too.
Well, hopefully they take you up on that offer. So my last question for you, and I'm actually going to change it because I generally ask at the end, do you have any advice for new firefighters coming in? But staying on the topic, obviously you have a class coming up at Firehouse Expo, right, in September.
Yep.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about that, and maybe why they should come attend your class if they happen to be in the area.
Well, cool. Thanks for that. It's a 60-minute session, so not a lot of time to do a lot of deep dives, but enough time to hopefully have some just good discussions. To scratch the surface. Just basically in the short amount of time that we have there in Columbus, I think it's Thursday morning from 8 to 9, basically I'm going to take some leadership tips, my high level tips that I think are relevant for all ranks, fire chief all the way to firefighter. Just hopefully doing some deep dives on some leadership tips. In every class I do, we try to share some pictures, maybe some videos, not Monday morning quarterbacking anything or critiquing anything, but trying to learn from things as teachable moments that apply to everybody around the country, regardless of type or size of department. And, it's always refreshing to recognize that whether I'm talking to you guys or I'm talking to anybody in class or they're hopefully talking to me, we all have the same issues, regardless of our size and type of department or part of the country we're from. We all have the same leadership challenges. And I'm not the guy telling you what to do. I'm here to hopefully provide some suggestions, some, maybe a connection that we can talk afterward or reach out afterward, because we all have problems. But I'm just there trying to throw some high level stuff out and then hopefully see what sticks. And then we have some whatever conversations that hopefully will be driven by the group that is there, and see what we can take away, because I'm just like probably you guys think, I love being able to speak with others, but I also love being a student as well too, because I learn. But even as an instructor, we learn a lot from those that are, we're fortunate to have in front of us. So long story short, hopefully get a chance to see you guys if you were in Firehouse Expo in Columbus next month. And FDIC just found out I got accepted for that. So as much as I enjoy the leadership stuff, which the Firehouse Expo class will focus on, FDIC, I got selected for a 4-hour classroom session. Tips on promotional process stuff. And I'll be upfront about that, as so many people, like I shared earlier, what's the fast track? I get that too on promotions. What's the fast, easy way to get promoted? Give me the playbook. There is no playbook. I'm going to piss you off because you got to be you. I'm going to give you some high level suggestions, but you got to be the one that is there on game day, not me. You, right from the heart, right from the brain, not selling a bunch of bullshit or selling your soul to the devil, but you got to be you. And maybe you is not ready to be you in that position. But so again, hopefully get a chance to see folks, either it's Firehouse Expo, FDIC next year, or somewhere out there. Maybe it's your department. I got a lot of teaching opportunities scheduled into next year for fire departments, other stuff. So very blessed and fortunate to be in this position. So I can't thank you all enough for the opportunity. I don't know if I have a chance to share my website at the end or not, but I can plug that now or later, whatever works.
Hey, this is your time. Have at it, brother.
Since my name is so difficult, I don't expect anyone to crash your computer if you try to Google my last name, probably, but code3firetraining.com. So nice and easy, code 3, the letter or the number, doesn't matter. They're both code3firetraining.com, or just Google my name. My website, I'm not trying to hawk anything, has free stuff links on there. So a lot of free stuff for entry-level firefighters. I also teach the college, like I mentioned earlier, and I run their website. So a lot of stuff that's linked off my website, but free stuff links for all ranks of personnel. I mean, I have people coming up to me every conference, which is just really weird, and say, hey, you don't know me, but your stuff on the website or your YouTube channel, I got a couple hundred videos to help people get hired, get promoted. Your stuff, you don't know me, but it's helped me get to whatever. And shit, that's cool. And I don't expect the accolades, but it is nice at least knowing the work I put in for it is getting heard out there and benefiting others, even though only a few people sometimes say it, but that's okay. It helps reinforce why I'm positive, why I'm fortunate to do why I do what I'm fortunate to do. So code3firetraining.com, my cell phone's on there, access to all my social media stuff. Feel free to connect, reach out, check out the information on the website. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. It's amazing when people say, I don't want to bother you. That's why I put my contact information. That's why social media has made it so easy to reach out to people in today's world. There's no reason not to. We all put our pants on the same way, whether we're a chief, whether we're a firefighter, FDNY versus podunk, middle of nowhere. Most guys that make themselves available, especially at conferences, especially like here, are pretty down-to-earth people. So hopefully you all find me that way too. Not you guys. I mean, you find me that way, I hope, but others have never been.
Yeah, well, awesome, brother. I appreciate your time. That's all I have for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Nick. I know he's got some questions for you, and then we'll close it out after that.
All right. So just 3 quick questions, and then we'll wrap her up here. But my first question for you, Steve, is throughout your career, held a lot of different ranks and roles and things. But what has been your favorite position in your career?
Favorite position? I can probably say all of them in some way or another, but probably loved, in all honesty, probably captain the most, because as a wise mentor taught me years ago, it's like when you become captain, you're like you own your own 7-Eleven franchise. A shift, B shift, whatever station, Firehouse 3. But that's where I think, as much as I enjoyed all the other positions, being a firefighter stuff, I was never the mechanically inclined one. I was the mechanically declined one. My wife's the inclined one. And I'm good with that. She does the yard work. She does the housework. I'd be stupid to complain about that stuff. But anyway, so I might not have been the perfect epitome of a firefighter that was great at all the hand. I mean, I knew what I had to do the job, but I was never that proficient firefighter at that. Not to say I was an awesome company officer, but I enjoyed the company officer probably the most because, even if you only have one or two, we had 3 and 4 person companies, at least the influence I thought I was able to have, because when I got to battalion chief, I thought I'd be able to, I got more stations, more crews, but then of course, more challenges in the sense of trying to get things on the same page. But I think company officer to me was the best. And there's days I wish I never was promoted above, but in a slow department, I probably would have been bored as ever. And again, you can get sometimes more things done at the higher levels, which sucks that it's that way, but it's the reality. So probably company officer.
Right on, right on. My second question is, and really, you can plug your book here too, but name a book on leadership that every firefighter should read. If you had to give one book that people that are aspiring to be leaders should read, what would that book be?
As I'm looking at my walls with all the books and everything else that you can't see, I mean, there's so many great books that are out there from so many different authors, many of whom we're fortunate to know and speak with and write with. God, I can't put a finger on, as I'm trying to cock my head a little bit, just because I think they all have their value. And I think that's why if we had time, I could put together a list, because I think there's value to almost every book. I mean, there's a lot of people that say, well, step up and
step up and lead.
I'm saying, yeah, Frank's got a lot of good stuff in his book, which is, I mean, definitely a great book there. But like the ship commander, it's your ship or whatever. I mean, a lot of people will say that, but a lot of unfortunately, the Navy principles may not work in the fire service. Or like, hey, extreme ownership, Jocko Willink. Jocko's got a lot of great stuff, great podcasts, but again, some of that may not work at your department or your position. So I mean, there's good pieces in everything. So I don't know if I can pick one. So sorry,
You're good. I put you on the spot here.
a lot of good shit out there, but
Yeah.
and it's funny because my last book from Fire Insuring Books and Videos, 101 Tips to Ace Your Promotional Exam. It's funny because people go, well, I don't want to get promoted. Well, it's not a promotional book. Why is it titled that? It's a leadership book because I put 101 different things I thought to help any one of us promote from firefighter all the way up. Like number one, prepare for the position, not the test. So many people prepare for the test. Well, what I did was I put my 101 tips in there, which is leadership. But then I had a lot of other friends, fire engineering authors, FDIC instructors, Mike Galliano, Mike Dugan, Billy Goldfeder, Larry Conley, Dave McGlynn. I mean, shit, the who's who of FDIC and fire engineering. I had each of them contribute a couple pages to support my tips. So there's a lot of, fire officer perspectives. There's a company officer, some fire chiefs in there like Dennis Rubin. So it's really a leadership book. And I'm not saying it's the best because there's, like I said, so many great books out there, but it's a good resource. That's really a leadership book for anybody. But
well, that's it. It settles it. Get Steve's book, 101 Tips to Ace Your Promotional Exam. We're gonna put it out there. I'll be honest, man. Like I love the fact that you draw from so many sources.
mm-hmm.
I know that everybody has. I'm the same way. It's hard to pick a book, right? It's hard to pick one particular book, but I think like there's so much good content, and you just have to be able to go sift through that material and figure out how that applies to your job. So no problems there, man. I get it. It is hard especially if you like to read. It's hard to sit there and be like, man, like this is the one. But So,
sorry, just to cut you off for 1 second.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where we talk about leadership, followership, and everything else. That's where people get in trouble because there are some people that's like this one book, whatever this book is. Jocko Willink, he's the man, and that's I go to his musters, I got his podcast. It's Jocko or death. That's cool. But it's almost like a cult type of thing that it's like you got to broaden your horizons because Jocko's got a lot of great things, just like everybody else does. But when you're so invested in one, it's almost like a blind worshiper that can't see for themselves, like you said, to take something from everybody, good and not so good, maybe.
Sure. Well, I think Corley Moore sums it up pretty well when he says leaders are readers. And I think it's a good way to sum it up, right? If you want to lead, you have to expose yourself to different philosophies, different takes on stuff, different content material. Like if you stay stagnant in the pool, and you never circulate the water, it's going to get stale. It's going to, you're going to have issues growing and expanding and being better. So my last question for you, brother, and I'm going to change it up over what I had. But this question, I think we've asked it several times, and it's always interesting to get people's takes on it, especially because none of this is scripted. It's just kind of random, reactions. But there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the fire service now, and in our country, and in the world, and things have certainly changed, even in my time on the job of the last 18 years. And certainly you've seen, from the early 90s to where you're at now, a tremendous change in the fire service. But what do you feel is the biggest issue or the biggest challenge facing the American fire service today?
Just to tag on one thing earlier, a friend of mine, San Jose, Captain James Mendoza, has a bumper sticker, reading is sexy. Hey, reading is sexy, of course. But biggest challenge today, I think, is it can be summed up. Every one of our challenges in life, not just the fire service, always comes down to, think about it, communication and leadership. Take a look at any Dear Abby, Dear Ann Landers, or every newspaper has those self-help columns. And usually every problem that's brought forth for a solution or proposed solution is somebody that doesn't basically want to communicate with the other person, doesn't want to deal with conflict, basically doesn't want to demonstrate any leadership qualities. Because that was the old saying is like, well, I got a problem with that person. Have you tried talking with them? Well, sometimes you do and it doesn't work out. Maybe because your conflict resolution skills suck, or maybe because theirs does, or they don't want to communicate. But I think our biggest struggle today, as much as I want to say division, because we have a division, it seems like a lot of people say, well, politics is divided. The world is divided. And whether it's politics or not, it's like smoothbore versus fog nozzle. If you don't believe me, why don't you, I dare you to do a tweet right now that say smoothbore nozzles suck. I mean, I don't think they suck, but you want to see how much the world is divided, or fog nozzles kick ass. Yeah. He said no firefighter ever. But here's the point. They're both tools. There's a time and a place, just like when you put oxygen on somebody, it's not always a non-breather. Sometimes nasal cannula, sometimes BVM. Ventilation isn't always vertical, sometimes mechanical, sometimes horizontal. But I think the biggest challenge we have today, and I'm going to point my phone out here, is I think these are awesome. I think the technology we have is great in today's fire service and today's world. There's drawbacks, though. It's taken the social aspect out of it, whereas so many solutions, like I said, leadership and communication. When I got a company officer that comes in and says, well, the kids today, the probie today is on his phone at the kitchen table. We need a policy that says probies can't have their phones at the kitchen table. Honest conversation. I'm like, what's your firefighter doing while the probies, the off probation firefighter? Well, he's in the recliner. Okay, we can't have a separation of policies of probation or non-probationer. Have you tried talking to the guy? Well, not really. Well, how about setting your expectation, your leader's intent, and then he or she don't know what they don't know. If you're not going to tell me anything differently, I'm going to keep myself occupied on my phone, as most people do. So everything boils down, I think, today, where we've taken the communication aspect out of it, because in the old school days, it was like, hey, call everyone for dinner, and you get on the PA system. Now it's like group text for everybody, which is great if that gets the job done. But the face-to-face communication and the ability, like you said earlier, to be able to have conversations and just to be able to realize that when there's a problem and you're not maybe seeing eye to eye with somebody, before you get jumped down their throat, look yourself in the mirror and maybe say, maybe it's me that's not, I need to change my message, or I got to basically change let you understand the context of the message. So I think leadership and communication, which makes it more tough today to be a supervisor in any line of work than it ever has been, because people want to know the why and people want to be heard and have their say and everything else. But I think the whole thing comes down to leadership and communication, which there's no easy answer. I mean, looking back at it, maybe firefighter's the easiest job in the world, because you just do what you're told and have fun and not worry about responsibility. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, I second that one.
I resemble that remark.
Yeah.
No, and that's true. People ask me all the time, why don't you want to be a driver? Why don't you do this? And I was like, listen, man, I like taking orders and doing my job, and that's it.
Having
like,
a blast.
I'm totally cool with that,
Yeah.
But it also comes to, like, I think as you build respect in your career, people will ask your opinions on things too, which I feel like some people think that, like, if you're at the lowest rank, you don't have any value, and that's just absolutely not true. I think you have an immense amount of value if you allow yourself to continuously be a student of the craft and understand what it is that's expected of you.
And on the flip side, having those leaders above you, company officer, chief officer, that also know their folks so well, because they've had the conversations, and they're not stuck in their little bubble, that they know who to tap on the shoulder or just get an ear from, like, hey, I know you're the you're a contractor off duty. Can I get your opinion on whatever? Or I know you're speaking on the circuit and you're out there doing all the search stuff here, or whatever else. Is there a better way we should be doing this? And hopefully not allowing ego and pride to get in the way of, rank should not matter. But again, that's why I said leadership is more challenging to take, because it forces us to have to get to know really everybody more so than ever, to make sure we get the results we need.
Yeah, 100%, man. Well, this has been a great conversation, Steve. I really, really have enjoyed having you on the show, man. For those listening, go check out Steve's class at Firehouse Expo in September, and then at the FDIC at April there. Going to be a great time. Both conferences have a great lineup. Great instructors going to be there. Always a good time to catch up with people. And then, like I said, look up Steve's website. That was one more time, Steve.
Code3firetraining.com.
Yep. And like I said, check them out. Hit them up on social media if you got questions. More than happy to answer questions, like you said. But Steve, thank you again for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us and your insight. Definitely have enjoyed the conversation, man. Like most of our conversations on here, we could go. I mean, we could make a whole day on just that one topic, and it really is the thing that I love about this is the organic nature of how we do the show, having these real conversations. It's not scripted. It's not, it's just like sitting at the table, and that's the beautiful thing about the fire service, man. Some of the best conversations happen in that setting, right, where it's not. It's not structured in the sense of, we're not sitting there like, oh, we got to hit this, and this. We hit many rabbit trails in this conversation over the last 2 hours and 18 minutes. But I freaking love it. I love the passion, brother. I love the fact that, you retired a couple years ago and you're still giving back to the job. You're still loving the job. You're still helping other people be successful. And man, that's what it's all about, right? That's really what it comes down to. So thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for your dedication to making the job better. And hopefully, like I said, folks will get a lot out of this conversation, and go check out your website, check out your classes. Hopefully, people walk away feeling like this was helpful to them. And as they, this thing, no matter what level you're at, learning to be a good leader starts from day one, right? It starts with learning how to value people, to take care of people, people next to you. And as your circle of influence grows, hopefully we're putting these principles to practice and continuing to expand our leadership abilities. So that being said, that's all I got. Sean, you got anything else, brother?
No, man, I think everybody hit it. So it's been a pleasure talking with you guys this morning. So feel good, ready to go on with the day, getting it out. And now my wife doesn't have to hear me talk fire shit all day because I got it out of my system.
Well, thank you guys again for the opportunity, as well as the flexibility in scheduling. I know it's just a pain for get everyone together with different time zones, but again, honored to have the opportunity, and you know how to get a hold of me. But look forward to seeing you guys in the future, and hopefully doing this again at some point. But all good. Keep up great work, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Safe flight today, brother.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.
Take care. See you.